Hey everyone, it's Alan Schimmel and you're watching TechStrong TV. Today's Thursday, June 11th, and thanks for joining us. You know, this is the first week we transitioned to a 3-day-a-week, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday formula, and we have been replaying some of the first 50 episodes of TechStrong TV we played one yesterday, excuse me, and we have another one that we'll play again tomorrow on Friday the 12th, and we'll be back on Monday with more new content. So we hope you like the cadence, that it works for you. We just feel with a lot of people either going back to work in their offices, and I realize that's not all of you, or just everyone, getting back into the new normal. A 3-day-a-week cadence for TechStrong TV was the right thing to do. For everyone involved, including myself. I was doing way too many interviews. But we'll still do lots of great interviews, lots of good news, and I think information that you're going to appreciate. For today's event, or for today's show, I wanted to just emphasize a few things. We pre-record many of the interviews a day or two before. We try to keep the content as fresh as possible. Sometimes we'll delay things because we have to honor embargoes that we deal with from our vendors and partners and sponsors, and so sometimes we'll hold a interview a little longer, and you may see the news up on DevOps.com or Security Boulevard or Container Journal, and it's a day or two later till you actually see the interview here on TechStrong TV, and that's just the nature of it. The other thing is, we are playing slowly, one a day, going through a lot of the sessions that we've done over at TechStrong Con this last week, and so we'll try to give you at least one of those a day. We hope you appreciate it. But you can still go to TechStrongCon.com if you want to see more or all of them. You can register and log in there to check it out for yourself. We have a bunch of other new exciting announcements coming out. On Monday, I think we'll be announcing something around DevSecOps and working with our friends at the RSA conference. So stay tuned for that. But for now, let's get to today's show. For today's show, I've got some, as I said, some new, some old. First of all, I have an interview I did with my friend Chris Eng. Chris is one of the not founders, but found stones, if you will, one of the bedrock people at Veracode. Chris has been running their research team for as long as I can remember. And great guy, wicked smart. And Chris is going to talk to us about a new survey. It's the annual survey that Veracode does with some great insights around AppSec and so forth. Then I had a chance to meet, this is a new person, I had a chance to meet Clyde Siepersand, and Clyde's with Linux Foundation Education. And he's talking about a new cloud engine. It's a 6-month course that Linux Foundation rolled out around cloud engineering that it's really kind of bifurcated around Linux and around cloud. And it's for someone who really wants to be professional about being a cloud engineer. This isn't necessarily a beginner's class. It's a professional level certification. But the expectation is that you're going to put about 20 hours a week into this course. So this is not I don't need to study, just give me the test. This is a real course for people who are serious about being cloud engineering pros. And Clyde will tell us more about that. Then my third interview today is with someone I've had the pleasure of knowing here in the local South Florida tech community now for a few years. Joe Russo started what became to be called Palm Beach Tech. I don't know, it's got to be 4+ more years ago. He was kind of a voice in the wilderness talking about making the Palm Beaches and greater South Florida area a tech community. They follow a lot of what my friend Brad Feld wrote about in startup communities, about what are the kinds of things you need to really have a self-sustaining startup community. And Joe has dedicated himself to this and the Palm Beach tech people. And, we're making some progress. This isn't Boulder. It's not Austin. It's certainly not Silicon Valley. but it's South Florida, and between Miami, Fort Lauderdale, West Palm, we actually have a pretty decent population center and a lot of the ingredients you need for a successful startup community. So, and tech community. So we're going to talk with Joe. He's going to tell us a little bit about Palm Beach Tech and what he's doing and what we're seeing here in South Florida. And whether you live in South Florida or you're interested in maybe moving to South Florida, it's a great place to live when there's no COVID and so forth. It really goes for any of the towns that we're seeing pop up, right, with tech communities. One of the lessons I think we've learned is you don't have to live in San Francisco or the Valley or New York or Boston to work in tech, right? There's no reason tech companies can't hire you where you are. And so we're starting to see articles about people, leaving cities to move to less densely populated areas. And I think we will see tech communities popping up all over. And it's not just the U.S., but all over. And I think Palm Beach Tech is a great example of that. So Joe will tell us what he's doing, and we'll introduce you to Palm Beach Tech. After that, we are going to go, as I mentioned, we're going to be doing TechStrong Con, some replays from there. I got a really good TechStrong Con session lined up for you today. It's my friend Baruch Sudagursky from JFrog. And if you know Baruch, he's a funny guy. I mean, he keeps it interesting. You got to laugh. Baruch's joined by his friend Leonid Igolnik, and they are in togas, but Baruch still has his black hat, but he has the gold leaf crown around the black hat to give it that ancient Greek toga look or Roman look. And it's a toga party. It's called DevOps at Scale, a Greek tragedy in 3 parts. Once you get past the togas and the whole, they're in an amphitheater, pay attention to what Leonid and Baruch talk about, because it really is a great session, and I think you'll like it. After that, I'll be back with our news, headlines around the sites, and then we're going to turn things over to Charlene O'Hanlon, our managing editor. Charlene has a good interview today with Raja Rao, senior developer and the head of global growth at Applitools, and he's also the creator and head of the Test Automation University, TAU, which recently reached 50,000 members, which is a fantastic milestone, and congratulations to them. Then we have, we'll be getting over to the Analyst Corner with Mitch Ashley. And Mitch Ashley, CEO of Accelerated Strategies Group. After Mitchell, we have a channel roundup session with the one and only Mike Vizard. And Mike's guest this week is Scott Sellers, and he'll tell you more about him. And then I'll be back to close things up. Sounds like it's going to be a great Thursday on TechStrong TV, everyone. Stick around. We're going to take a quick commercial break, and we'll be right back.
With the COVID-19 pandemic, it is important to protect yourself and others from spreading the virus. Prevention and personal safety is key. Here are the top ways you can protect yourself and others. Wash your hands often with soap and water for at least 20 seconds. Avoid touching your face. Practice social distancing and avoid high-risk potential people. If you are showing symptoms, stay at home. If you must go out, wear a face mask. Always cover coughs and sneezes with a tissue or use the inside of your elbow. Clean and sanitize frequently touched surfaces daily. Together, we can prevent this pandemic.
Hey everyone. Okay, we're ready for our first segment for today. And as I mentioned at the top of the hour, or at the top of the show, our first guest is my friend Chris Eng. Chris is just, he's a rock star in security. There's no other way to say it. He's run the research team at Veracode for as long as I can remember. I know Chris a long time, man. We've been working in the security space together for a long time. And it's been great to see his career actually kind of continue upwards through all of it. Veracode, of course, does a great annual survey on AppSec and security. They have a new survey results out. Chris is going to go over some of the key findings with us, and as usual, he really just nails it. So let's go now to my interview with Chris Ang of Vericode.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, it's Alan Schimmel, TechStrong TV. Thanks for joining us for this next interview segment. I'm really happy to be joined by a friend of mine from the security industry. I was going to say an old friend, but then you would think he's old. But I've known Chris Ang for many years in security. It's always a pleasure to have him. Chris heads up the security research team at Vericode and has for a long time. Hey Chris, welcome.
Good to be here, Alan. And I would say I do feel pretty old, so you can include me as an old friend.
If you feel old, how do I feel, Chris? So
I don't know.
Go easy. Anyway, hey Chris, Vericode came out with an addendum or a special edition of the Vericode security report, correct?
Yeah, we did. I mean, we do State of Software Security every year, and it focuses a lot on what we're finding across our customer base, what flaws are being introduced by developers. And this time we took a specific focus on open source, and we wanted to understand what type of behaviors we're seeing around there with the applications being built with open source, specifically the types of flaws that were being introduced with libraries and any patterns that came up as a result of that. And so this report that we just came out with last week includes the data from about 85,000 applications and 350,000 libraries. So again,
wow,
as is typical for us, a pretty large data set.
That's a huge data set. Okay, so what are the interesting findings?
Well, you won't be too surprised to find that there are a lot of flaws out there, and libraries are just like any other piece of code, right? It's just that somebody else wrote them. But if I'm a developer building software using a combination of my own code and some libraries, I'm going to introduce some vulnerabilities myself, and then I'm going to inherit some vulnerabilities from the open source libraries. And so my overall risk posture is a combination of those two. And that's kind of what we start with. And so we, because we spent so much time focusing on the first part of that in the past, we wanted to look at what's getting inherited and what are we seeing there. And I think one thing that was surprising was the amount of transitive dependencies that we have. And so what I mean by that is, if you're a developer and you include a library to help build your application, that library may also include other libraries, and then those libraries may also include other libraries. And from the developer standpoint, they don't necessarily see all that, right? They're aware that they're using one library, but not aware of the whole tree that comes along with that. And so the attack surface is actually a lot larger than developers realize. When we scan applications, we actually see everything. So we identify all the libraries that are being used, and we can tell whether a vulnerability that's introduced is as a result of a direct dependency or a transitive dependency. And so we found that 47% of flawed libraries and applications are actually transitive. And so that's a whole area that developers were really not paying a lot of attention before. So that was kind of interesting. Mm-hmm. Another area I think was that 75% of all the flaws that were found actually fell into 4 categories. There's so many different types of mistakes that you can make in building software, but when it comes down to it, 75% of the categories that we found in libraries were access control issues, cross-site scripting, insecure deserialization, and injection. So those are, again, one of the problems that we often face is how to prioritize, and so that kind of helps us understand what we're seeing the most of.
Yep. Just, I will tell you, so the whole bug bounty thing and all of that, right, has obviously increased the amount of bugs or vulnerabilities that are being found on a lot of these sites. And look, we have it here at MediaOps, right? We operate, I don't know, there's 13 different websites actually that we operate, yeah, believe it or not. And we get reports from researchers, I don't want to say often, but regularly. And I would say, the cross-site scripting and the 4 you mentioned, That I could see why. No doubt that's 75%. I would be surprised if it's not 90% of the kinds of garden variety errors that we're seeing out there, vulnerabilities. But what's in the other 25%, Chris?
Oh, just your standard variety, OWASP type issues. It's just smaller prevalence issues that maybe are not as likely to be exploited or not as likely to be reported. Now, remember, a lot of these types of issues in open source libraries are on these lists because they make their way into the National Vulnerability Database. Somebody reports them and they put out an exploit for them or so on. So they do tend to cluster towards the types of issues that are more easily exploited, I think. Another interesting thing that we maybe expected but didn't really have any numbers on before was the discrepancy in how libraries are used across different languages. So when we broke it down by language, we found that JavaScript applications use a tremendously large number of libraries. I think that the median, or actually the geometric mean, which we use kind of the middle point, was about 400 JavaScript libraries in your kind of typical JavaScript application, and the 90th percentile was well over 1,000. I mean, can you imagine like pulling down that many libraries into a single application? But that's the nature of development there, and it's partly because of the ecosystem. We actually there's a chart in the report that covers JavaScript specifically, and we looked at particular libraries and how often they're included in the overall picture of applications we see. And so there's this one library called inherits in JavaScript, right? It's 36 lines of code, so it's barely anything, and it's included in 92% of JavaScript applications. And if you look at the top 10 JavaScript libraries, you find I think most of those are in like 80% of applications. There's just so much reuse, and some of them, one of them has 4 lines of code, but still that introduces a attack surface, right? If there's a vulnerability there, if you remember what happened a few years ago when this very small JavaScript library called LeftPad was pulled off NPM, and suddenly a bunch of the internet just broke because everybody was depending on that. So this dependency is at a scale that we didn't necessarily expect. That's particularly with JavaScript, but we broke it down for other languages as well. JavaScript also had a lot more transitive dependencies than other languages. So it's interesting to see those discrepancies when you compare JavaScript versus like a Python or a Java or a .NET, for example.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of great data around that.
I'm not surprised with the JavaScript kind of conundrum, because it does. I mean, but keep in mind that the problem you're highlighting here is also almost a direct result of the overwhelming success of JavaScript. The ubiquity of JavaScript in our development. Right, if you didn't have everybody using it and pulling, and its ability to pull from all of these different sources, you wouldn't have the problem you highlighted.
Yeah, I mean, the ecosystem aligns well with the way that developers want to develop, right? They want to be able to pull stuff on demand as they're building something. They want to be able to incorporate little pieces and not reinvent the wheel every time. Though I don't know that it would be necessarily bad to reinvent a four-line library, but whatever the case may be, those. But
you know the situation there, Chris. If it's a 4-line library that I wrote and you're going to use, all right, the two of us use it, it's fine. And then your cousin's doing something, so we're going to give it to him to do. And my friend's doing something. All right, so now there's 4 of us. And then the next thing you know, 88,000 people are using it, right? Or 100,000 people are using it. And so where is that cutoff where you say, wait a second, too many people are using this, I'm just going to rewrite this in a clean room environment and not have that dependency hanging over my head. But then multiply that by how many of these components are getting Frankensteined into an app, right? Or libraries and snippets and stuff, and which ones do you rewrite? I mean, I empathize with developers who it's hard. We love the idea of having these huge repositories of code snippets and code that we can reuse. It's because it's to save us time, right? And to make it easier.
Yeah, at a minimum, it's good for developers to understand the scope of the attack surface that they're bringing in by using all these libraries. I think the goal is not to change the way that developers develop. That's that's a losing battle, right? We've learned that in security over the years. We're not going to change that. So what we have to do is give them the right level of information and visibility to make smart decisions around that. We're not going to suddenly tell them to stop using the libraries. That's ludicrous, right?
No, it's just not going to happen, right? So, Chris, well, let's finish up. Any other big findings you want to highlight?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, a couple things. One is that sometimes we're overwhelmed by the amount of findings that we have. If you're a developer and you suddenly get a report with lots of findings, and you've got to figure out how to incorporate that into your schedule. Yeah, exactly. Sometimes it's difficult to prioritize those, and so one area that we did in this report was we kind of gave one view into how to prioritize that. So at the top of the funnel, you have all of the flaws in all of the libraries that you're using, right? Say that's like 100%. That's your starting point. But then you can use other pieces of data to kind of chop that down. So the first cut is, well, which of these known vulnerabilities has a public exploit available out there, proof of concept exploit in exploit DB or any of the public repositories? That cuts it down somewhat. Then you can say, well, which of these vulnerabilities that have public exploits are actually being exploited in the wild? And that's an imperfect measurement, right? We don't know everything that's going on out there, but we can. We were able to incorporate some data from Kenna Security, where they use some of their sensors to indicate where they're seeing these attack patterns. So anyway, so you can cut it down even more by saying which ones have an exploit and which ones are actually being attacked in the wild. And then finally, you can cut it down even one more level, and you can say, of that last chunk, which ones of those do I see a confirmed code path in my application to the vulnerable part of the library, right? So I could be using a library, but maybe I'm not using the part of the library that's flawed, right? Which could happen all the time. Sure. It's not easy to track that with 100% confidence, but what we can tell when we report some of this back to developers, we can say, well, we definitely saw a path from your code to the code in the library that we know to be vulnerable. And so you should definitely work on those first. If there's a confirmed path, there's a proof of concept exploit, and it's something that's being exploited in the wild. And so when you apply those three filters to it, you're down at 1% of what you started with, which is pretty good. It's a pretty good start. That doesn't mean to say you shouldn't fix the other stuff, but you at least know what's most important to focus on. Yeah. Going hand in hand with that is that we looked at how difficult is it actually to do these patches, right? Sometimes you hear like, well, it's very disruptive to patch a library because other things break when you have to go from like version 1 to version 3 or something that's major. And what we found was that most flaws are a minor upgrade or less, meaning that if you're on version 1.1, it's solved by going to version 1.2, or there's a lot of different numbering
1.11, right?
Yeah, exactly. So many different numbering schemes that's not standard, but that you wouldn't have to go to like the next major version, which means less disruption, less likely that something's going to break or be deprecated, and so on. So we found that 81% of the known flaws in libraries were a minor upgrade or less. So that makes it a little bit less daunting, I think. There's a lot of good stuff in there, but it really is going to help developers become aware of what they're introducing, and that the overall task of prioritizing and patching is not quite as bad as we maybe thought it was.
Absolutely. So, Chris, we're running low on time, but one of the things I want to kind of get across to our audience is, look, research for research's sake alone is noble, right, and necessary and everything else. But the point of these reports are really to provide actionable intelligence to developers, security teams, and everyone about how to be more secure. But there's also kind of a direct nexus from, look, here's what we found in our surveys and our reporting, and here's how the Veracode product line or service line, whatever you want to call it, right? Here's how Veracode helps you with these things. But sometimes it doesn't come across because we look at these security reports almost in like a pure academian kind of focus, right? And we almost hesitate to connect the dots. So I'm going to ask you just a couple minutes here. Connect the dots for us. How does using Veracode help you tie these things up?
Yeah, well, I mean, first and foremost, Veracode, because we're delivered as a cloud service and just make it easy to kind of manage an overall application security program. Number one is that visibility that you have into the overall risk of the program, right? If everything is being scanned, you see your first-party flaws, your third-party flaws all in one place, and you have a very good, at a glance view of how you're doing as an organization. We give actionable remediation guidance. The thing I mentioned about kind of cutting it down to where you have confirmed paths 100%. From your code to a vulnerable library function, that's a Veracode specific differentiator. Like nobody else has that. And so that spending the time on what matters most is a big part of running a successful program. I do think that we try to take what we find in terms of behaviors and map that into advice to customers to say, well, here's what we see successful programs doing. And we covered some of that in our last major State of Software Security report, where we talked about the reduction of security debt and how that correlated to more frequent scanning. And so that's great to say, go do more frequent scanning and you'll probably have better outcomes. But the way that we've built our products to integrate very easily into CI pipelines, for example, for scans to be fast turnaround, for there to be good remediation guidance for developers. All of those features that we built into the product over time actually make it possible for our customers to adopt those behaviors and actually have the outcomes that we see as sort of the best practices in these reports. So hope that connects the dots a little bit.
Yeah, no, it does. Absolutely. Because, it's not really report season right now per se, but traditionally around RSA conference, excuse me, we would see a ton of reports come out from the various vendors and around breaches and data and security. And they're all great, and they're all great learning tools. And for us in the media, it's content, right? It's fodder to write about and video and talk about. But I often wonder, like, what do the security folks, what do the developers take out of these things so that they can improve, so that they're not next year's bad trend, right? Of using, bad JavaScript libraries or something like that.
Your best outcome, like you say, there's a lot of information. And so if developers come away with this, with the understanding that, number one, their dependencies are not only direct but transitive, and just kind of get that mindset that that's actually happening and they have to be aware of those vulnerabilities as well, that's a win. And the other understanding that the prioritization and a way to take this mountain of vulnerabilities and that you can actually break it down and figure out what matters most, and that it's not going to be a huge pain. It's like I said, so many minor upgrades should do the patches. I think that makes some of this stuff more realistic, or at least seem more achievable for developers. If they come away with those two things, that's a win. The rest of the data in the report is awesome. I would encourage people to read it. But you can only hope for so much. People need to be told things a few times before new habits kick in. So we're just happy for people to see the data.
As someone once told me, Chris, it's a process. We'll get there, right? Yeah.
Sure is.
All right, man. Hey, we're about out of time. First of all, thanks for joining us on TechStrong TV. Thanks for all the research that you guys continually do, and we'll be in touch. Okay.
You bet. Good talking to you.
All right, Chris Ang, Veracode here on TechStrong TV. We'll be right back with our next guest.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
Great interview with Chris, and now let's move along to our next interview. And our next interview is, again, I mentioned, was with Clyde Seepersad of the Linux Foundation. Clyde's with the Linux Foundation educational arm, and they've just rolled out a serious 20-hour week, 6-month class for people who want to be cloud engineering professionals. It teaches you the principles of Linux, cloud, and a bunch more. If that's what your career path is, this may very well be the class for you, but it's not something to take casually. This really is a class for serious people who are serious about this subject. So let's see what Clyde has to say and what's happening at the Linux Foundation.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us for this next segment here on TechStrong TV. My guest on this segment is Clyde Seepersad. Did I say that right, Clyde?
You did, Alan. Thanks.
Okay. Clyde is with the Linux Foundation, and we're going to talk about a new training-related program that the Linux Foundation is rolling out, and it's kind of different. It's not your dad's training, and that's probably a good thing. Clyde, welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here, Alan.
All right. Before we jump into the training, Clyde, why don't we give a little bit of your background and position with the Linux Foundation so our audience has some context?
Sure. I head up the training and certification program at the Linux Foundation, and we do just a broad suite of e-learning courses and certification exams, but they're all geared towards the same thing, which is how do we get people onboarded and skilled up in all these new open source technologies that have become the new normal in just about every aspect of technology.
Mm-hmm. It's true. I mean, well, to our audience anyway, there's no argument to be made about open source and cloud native and how important this has become in our world. But let's, if we can, for a moment, talk about the history of Linux Foundation training programs, right? I mean, I think they've been very, very popular, obviously, and for a long time were a real, and probably still are, I imagine, a real source of income for the Linux Foundation, as well as a way of spreading the knowledge, right? Of having, because one of the things I learned is if you can't have a successful technology out there if you don't have people who know how to use it.
Bingo.
Right,
that's exactly, and that's why we have the program, right?
Right. One thing leads to the other. Right.
Back in the day, there used to be this little bit weird dynamic where there was this expectation that you weren't really bona fide open source user if you were having to be trained on it, that somehow you were just supposed to download the README files and maybe hop on an IRC channel to ask your question. But of course, nobody learns software that way. You need to be trained, and you need to be trained in a way that is convenient and that's cost effective and that's vendor neutral. And that's exactly what we aim to do.
Absolutely. Now, I'm one of the co-founders of the DevOps Institute, Clyde. So it's more of an association and humans of DevOps. But look, the fact of the matter is we developed curriculum for 7 or 8 different certifications that we offer around DevOps. So I'm somewhat familiar, but the certification and training world has really changed. And I think things like Linux and cloud native have hastened that change, but also benefited from that change in that you don't necessarily, you used to be able to, I'm sure you know this being in the industry, right? You'd have people who go to a testing center or a classroom center, and there would be in-person sort of training sessions where maybe you're in with 20 or 15 strangers. Maybe it's 10 people from your organization going together, or they come to you. But it was very much sort of an in-person training and an in-person delivered kind of proctor exam for certification. And for for a big chunk of my life in technology, that's what certification training was all about. Then we saw the online classroom, right? The virtual training classrooms. And we also saw, Clyde, some people sort of, like you could almost take the certification exam without taking the course itself, which to me still doesn't make sense, quite frankly, but it's a thing, and a lot of people do it. But, the bottom line is we've seen the training market, like everything else in technology, it's ripe for disruption, and if it could be disrupted, it gets disrupted. It's disruptible. Right. And so that brings me in a long-winded way to our purpose today, which is a new sort of training program that you guys are rolling out.
Exactly. And I think you hit on all the high notes, right, Alan, which is how do you train people for the cloud in an environment where, to begin with, they can't put their hands on, right? The equipment's in the cloud, right? And so a lot of the methodologies that made sense in the past, where you could roll a server into the room, just don't apply anymore. And obviously, we're in a window right now with the pandemic where you can hardly even go outside, right? And so this idea of how do you give people access to the knowledge? How do you ensure that they get hands-on skills, right? Actual ability to work in these systems, because ultimately, that's what people want for their career. That's what employers are looking for. They don't care about the certification because it's a piece of paper. They care about the fact that you've demonstrated skills. And in our case, all our exams are very heavily weighted towards what we call performance-based, which means you actually have a live system and you have tasks and you have to accomplish the tasks. And the thinking is, if you can accomplish those tasks under the time pressure of, the clock is ticking, under the observational pressure of a live human proctor monitoring you, that's a reasonably good facsimile for sort of the pressure of being on the job. And so if you can do that over the course of 2 hours, well, congratulations, you've actually demonstrated a skill that I think a lot of employers are going to find valuable. Now, the trick is, how do you also train them for that? How do you prepare them to be ready and confident? And that's what we've been noodling over for really 1.5 years, and we just now got the product out to say, okay, people make jokes about 3-dimensional chess, right? How do you solve for, it's got to be affordable, it's got to be accessible, it's got to be something that really builds skills, and it's got to be something that really tests skills. And that's what we try to put together here, is to say, okay, we think if we combine these things where there are self-paced training courses, and you combine that with a community, an online community, a forum where everybody can interact with each other as candidates as well as with an instructor, and you combine that with live instructor sessions, what I call office hours, right? Drop by if you have a question. There's a session every day. You're beginning to create an environment where people with different styles of learning, people with different availabilities of windows of time, people with different sort of propensities, they can be slower here but move faster there. You create a space where people can sort of chart their own path to build this core set of skills. And what and when we listen to the market to say, okay, what's the minimum set of competencies that if somebody's going to be a competent cloud engineer, and not surprisingly, it came down to sort of three big buckets, right? You got to understand Linux because virtually every VM, every hosted instance is Linux.
Yep.
You got to understand DevOps, at least conceptually, because everything's continuous delivery, right? You can't just sit there and assume the code is never going to change or it's going to change once a year. So you have to grok this concept of continuous integration, continuous delivery. And finally, you have to understand containers. It's just the way of cloud native is the new normal. You have to understand what containers are. You have to understand how you orchestrate them with Kubernetes. And if you can demonstrate that portfolio of skills, it doesn't give you every skill you need for every job, but it gives you a fantastic base of skills to go try to start your career and launch your career from. And that's really what we try to achieve here, right? Is how do we give people a platform where they've demonstrated a broad enough range of skills that they can be credible, even if they don't have 5 years of experience managing a live production cluster in the cloud.
Sure. Excellent. Now, and it's nice because it does give them a well-round, rather than taking an individual class and then I may or may not take a class on a different subject. This is much more of you get a good flavor of a little bit of everything or a lot of everything. How is it offered? I mean, it's obviously online now because everything is online and virtual. Is it self-paced or?
It is, and this is one of the challenges, right? It's a lot of content, right? We're telling people at least 20 hours a week for 6 months.
Wow.
This is not
6 months. Wow.
Yep. So now, obviously, some people who have more experience can jump in and move through faster, right? But what we're trying to do is telegraph to people, this is not a weekend hobby project. This is a substantial commitment to building out your career. And so, if the thought of 20 hours a week for 6 months scares you off, then that's a good reason to sit and think about what are you signing up for? Because, look, you and all your viewers know there's no quick fix, right? There's no magic pixie dust where all of a sudden you look at a few YouTube videos and you're competent to stand up a cluster, right? It just doesn't, It doesn't work that way. And what we've tried to do is say to folks, look, we have a sequence that we're recommending that you take the courses in. We have in fact, everybody gets a little worksheet that says that we suggest weeks 1 to 5 you work on this. But here's your column. You make a commitment. Do you think you can do it in 5 weeks? Do you think it might take you 10 weeks? Nobody's gonna slap your hand if you think you're gonna take twice as long, because the whole purpose is for you to map your path forward, right? To say, okay, how quickly do I think I can get through this? And by the way, fill it out in pencil, because if life changes tomorrow, you might want to adjust some of those dates. But we're trying to get people to map out for themselves what they think is reasonable, but also make the commitment, right? This is a meaty set of material because you're trying to build a really broad, important skill set, and you can't do it by next Tuesday.
No. Look, there's a segment of our audience, Clyde, who will tell you that no matter how many classes you're going to take, until you actually do it, you don't know, right? And so we try to make our training and classes like this more and more realistic, more and more real world, so that you do know when you take this stuff. It is just like working in a real world environment. But it also goes. You mentioned something, right? Are you serious about your career? Now, we all see 40 million, whatever the number is, of people who've lost their job in the last 2 or 3 months due to COVID and everything. We all see that, through it all, it looks like cloud and digital transformation, cloud migration is something that is probably going to pick up steam, going forward. So this is a great place for people who are at that cusp of, do I want to do this for a career? And if I'm going to do it for a career, I got to have the skills, right? Because the one thing in the tech space is There's plenty of jobs out there, and they pay good money for people who have skills. If you don't have the skills, just like anywhere else, right?
Well, it's funny, right? I joke with people all the time and say, look, you got a couple of options here. You can try to treat LinkedIn like a shopping cart where you're browsing and trying to poach people, but as fast as you're poaching them in the front door, somebody else is poaching them out the back door. Like, you're not going to solve a talent shortage by grabbing talent away from others. So how do you co-invest to make that talent and to grow that talent?
Grow your talent.
And again, this comes back to why we designed it, right? To be online, largely self-paced, but with a heavy component on skills. You have to pass 2 certification exams, right? You have to pass the Linux certification exam and the Kubernetes certification exam, both of which are hands-on live system exams. And if you can get through that and you can hang those 2 things on your wall, I believe that you've now demonstrated a substantial breadth of knowledge, a substantial mastery of that knowledge, and now you're credible. You know what? I might give you a shot, even though you don't have the great career on LinkedIn that somebody else does, because frankly, that is a zero-sum game, right? You got to create opportunities for new people to have a shot at this stuff.
Absolutely. And what you said, and I'm not here to badmouth LinkedIn or any other site, but that is a sort of a nature of the beast for us in the tech world, where you see these people who hop around like fleas, right? People don't stay more than a year or a year and a half, every 6 months.
And I don't blame them, because you know what? Recruiters are in their inbox all the time. Hey, I saw your profile on LinkedIn. You look amazing.
And you know what, Clyde? People don't ask for raises anymore. They just switch jobs, right? There was a time where you would ask for a raise. Now you just switch job. I think
they're unhappy when they send you the notes. Yep. When they text you to say they're not coming into work anymore. Well,
when you see that, or like I always know when someone asks me for a recommendation on LinkedIn or something like that, I say, okay, they're about to start looking. But that being said, I think the other thing is, we're not here advocating to jump around and hop around in jobs. And especially if you're an employer who's willing to invest in your employees getting this training and getting these certifications and becoming more valuable to you, right? I don't think employers are willing, or not willing, but employers aren't looking to cast those people aside. I think it is, over the long term, cheaper to grow talent.
Alan, our favorite, we're in Austin, Texas. Our favorite Chinese food place was shut down with all the lockdowns, and they've opened back up. I was chatting with the owner, and she said, we've got to go build out an online ordering system, because now we're a tech business. And I thought to myself, wow, like, the neighborhood Chinese place is now a tech.
They are. And not to pile on, but I was reading an article the other day that a lot of those businesses weren't built out. So when the Grubhubs and the Uber Eats and all these people came to them, they said, don't worry, we'll put your menu on for you. But what happens is like, out of every $10 of orders, the rest, that Chinese food restaurant only gets about $3. Because Uber takes about 65% between the delivery fee and all of that, and you can't run a restaurant on a 30% margin, 30% of the bill. So they got to do it themselves. They need to become a cloud company.
It's funny, right? Where's all that talent going to come from?
It's got to come. The world needs that skill set.
So this is our way of trying to help out with that. Let's create create a front door for people to get in.
Yep. Clyde, we've got to run, but before we do, where can people get more information on this?
Not surprisingly, it's on the web. It's training.linuxfoundation.org. We've got the program listed up there. There's a ton of information, to help people understand exactly what it is. So, check it out. Send us questions if you have it. We'd love to help people use this as an opportunity to launch their career into something that we think is going to be sustainable and long term.
Yep. Excellent, man. Clyde, thank you so much for joining us. Good luck with this new program. For people out there who maybe are saying, hey, is this the career for me? I want to, we hear so many people, if I only had the skills, I can get a job. Here's your chance. Go do it.
Check it out, training.linuxfoundation.org. Come have a look. We'd love to have you join us on this journey. Alan, really appreciate you having me on.
My pleasure, Clyde. Thank you. Clyde Sepper said Linux Foundation with their new training program for Linux and cloud. Check it out. This is Alan Schimmel for TechStrong TV. We'll be right back with our next guest. Next segment on TechStrong TV today is Joe Russo, founder, CEO, Palm Beach Tech. Many people don't think of Palm Beach or even South Florida as a tech hub. And when you think about it, we have all the ingredients to be a tech hub. We have a large population, a lot of universities, a lot of educated people, gateway to Latin America, very friendly business climate. Florida's a no income tax state. And Joe Russo has been pushing this and trying to, further the cause of at least the Palm Beaches and all of South Florida becoming the next great tech hub. Of course, with COVID, we're seeing people leave cities and the idea of dispersing. And you know what? South Florida should get their share. So, but Joe, again, has been preaching this for years, and he's made real progress. And by the way, if you have no interest in moving to Florida or the Florida tech scene, don't not watch this, because no matter where you are, there's lessons here on what you can do in your community to create a critical mass of tech for better jobs, better lifestyles, because each tech job supports so many other jobs, right? Because tech workers need food, they need other services, they have disposable income. So, great idea. Let's now go to Joe Russo from Palm Beach Tech.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us on this next episode segment of TechStrong TV. I wanted to go local, even hyper-local here for a moment. Those of you who know me or know our company, Media Ops, or watch TechStrong TV, we're based in Boca Raton, Florida, which, as I always tell people, is not a bad place to be. The weather's really nice. It's usually a great environment to work in, and it's a fun place to live in. One of the guys who's really kind of dedicated his life right now to making this a better place for the tech workers and for the tech community, and really has helped built the tech community here, at least in Palm Beach County and the rest of South Florida, is my friend Joe Russo, who is the executive director of Palm Beach Tech. Hey Joe, welcome to TechStrong TV.
Thanks for having me, Alan. Pleasure to be talking to you this afternoon.
Absolutely. So Joe, look, our audience is worldwide, probably 38% are in the US even, and then the rest of the world is duly represented. They may have heard of Palm Beach for various reasons, and they certainly have heard of Florida, and South Florida, Miami, of course, and Fort Lauderdale and West Palm, the three big cities in our area here. But they probably haven't heard of Palm Beach Tech. So Why don't we start there? Tell them about Palm Beach Tech, Joe.
Yeah, so Palm Beach Tech is a nonprofit whose mission is to build South Florida into a tech hub. We started about 5 years ago in West Palm Beach and obviously expanded our roots pretty well throughout the county. We have over 170 members who are tech companies and partners of all shapes and sizes. Our largest companies are Fortune 500 folks that you might have heard of, Carrier Corporation, Office Depot, NextEra Energy. And we have startups as well. They're just getting their start here locally as well. So it's pretty neat to see the diversity of our tech community. But for those that aren't really familiar with South Florida, it's probably one of the more unique geographic areas in the United States, and maybe in the world to some degree as well. You see, it was one of the only areas of the United States that was really settled post World War II. We had a entirely different way of designing cities. and designing transportation systems. So a lot of what South Florida has become is a very car-centric place, as opposed to most of the cities elsewhere, especially in the Northeast, where you have public transportation and trains and big cities. We're very different. We're very spread out here in South Florida. Because of that, organizations like us are really geared towards bringing people together in a very unique way, where otherwise you wouldn't be able to see the folks who are all in the same buildings or all in the same places. So, that's a little bit of why we do what we do. But, I'm a South Florida native. I'm a nerd. I love talking about technology and doing little bits like this here with you. And so that's why I do it, and that's why we're here.
Fantastic. And Joe, just again to educate some of the folks who may not be as familiar, in one way, yes, our population density isn't that of a big city, right? And that maybe helped us a little bit with this COVID thing. But to be clear, I forgot what the number was, but when you put together the Tri-County area of Palm Beach, Broward, which is Lauderdale, and Miami, what is it, 7 or 8 million people, something like that?
Something like that. I mean, speaking from a tech perspective, there's 150,000 tech jobs and tech professionals in South Florida. This is respect. And we also have a higher per capita retiree population than most anybody would imagine. So we have a lot of very unique qualities down here. And, from where I'm at, West Palm Beach, for me to get down to Miami is probably an hour and a half drive, or if I would hop on the Bright Line train, it would get me there in an hour. So there's a lot of
cross-pollination.
It's not small.
But we're also starting to see now people who do commute from Miami to West Palm and vice versa, or Lauderdale or Boca here. I think another thing, Joe, that I think people don't realize about the area is our education, our university system. I spent a lot of time in Boulder, right? Brad Feld, my friend there, got me out there. And I founded a company out there. And, Brad wrote the book Startup Communities and a bunch of actually books. There's a whole series around startup communities. And when, one of the things he says is you need anchor university because the universities turn out new talent and stuff. And when you look at our area, right here in Boca, we have FAU, which has a tremendous, computer science and tech program as well as an entrepreneur program. We have Lynn University, we have Kaiser University, we have, and these are just Palm Beach County ones now. I'm not even going into Broward and, and then Miami-Dade, of course. And so we have, do you know how many universities, colleges are in our area here like that?
Honestly, you can make a higher number depending on what your numbers are, because we also have a lot of campuses for
that's true.
Larger organizations or larger colleges. We have 2 state universities. So FIU, Florida International University, and FAU, Florida Atlantic University in Miami, and then in Boca Raton, respectively. We have state colleges in Palm Beach, Broward, and Miami-Dade counties. We have the large private institutions like Lynn University, like Kaiser University, Palm Beach Atlantic, Barry University, University of Miami, Nova Southeastern are 2 large.
Right, Nova has a huge program. I didn't even think about that one. I mean, so we have all the ingredients plus great weather to to really be a powerhouse in tech with, as you say, 150,000 jobs. Joe, what do you see as the challenges? Why aren't people talking about South Florida in the same breath as in Austin or a Boulder or some of the other places?
There's a lot of barriers there. Some are quantifiable and some are qualitative in that. The quantifiable are the talent data, right? We have 150,000 tech jobs. Last year, the Computer Technology Industry Association, CompTIA, put out in their Cyberstates report that the number of job postings increased 67% in South Florida. The year before, it was over 100%. So these are massive demands on tech jobs. And I think the number was only like 3,000 tech jobs were actually increased, when you have basically a demand of, I think it was like 60-something thousand in tech job postings in South Florida. So it's a high demand for what we have. And no university system is going to be able to keep up with that demand. And you take to the fact that our universities here in South Florida, the number of them there's some private ones that can be a little bit more nimble about their curriculum and what they teach and how they teach it. But the public institutions are limited by that. They have an extensive process to be able to change and adapt. And technology, unlike, let's say history doesn't change, right? Technology is changing on a dime. Every so often there's a new language or something new to learn. It's tough to keep up. But one of the things that we also have to do is try and attract a lot of people down here, and make sure that folks know there is opportunity to start your company, to get a job, to be an executive or leader if you're on a higher end type of position. But we so often limit ourselves to what we can do in South Florida, because it doesn't matter how big you want your company to grow. If you can't hire the people or spend the excess amount of dollars to recruit them from out of the area, you're not going to be able to build your company here. And, right. I think as much as there's a lot of history in South Florida, the personal computer was invented here.
Right here in Boca Raton.
Yeah, I just spoke to Pete Martinez actually today, who was one of the founding members of the IBM PC team. Mm-hmm. There's so much history here, and a lot of the companies and a lot of the innovators that we have today have a direct correlation to some of those older companies like IBM, like Pratt & Whitney, like Motorola, who set up shop here and really were the homesteaders, so to say.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, we should also mention Citrix is down in Fort Lauderdale, and they've spawned a bunch of second generation, third generation sort of startups. Modernizing Medicine is a big player down here now. I forgot the company with the VR stuff. Magic Leap is down here as well. But Joe, sometimes you never know where your blessings come from. I think one of the things we're seeing as a result of this COVID pandemic is that it really doesn't matter where you are. You can, we can work remotely, especially in the tech industry. I think more so than many others. And so, I think we're going to see, if we haven't already started to, a trend where people who are, paying crazy rents in cities like San Francisco or New York or Boston or, Chicago, or name any of these big cities where cost of living, especially housing, is so high. Why can't they move down here to Florida, right? Still work remotely if their company's going to, if they're going to work remote, it doesn't make a difference whether you're down the block or down the, down the corner. And at the same time have a maybe a little kick up in quality of life, right? I mean, it's a no income tax state and all of that great stuff, but it's not a bad, the weather's not terrible with air conditioning and everything else. Maybe that will.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see kind of how there's a top-down approach to that thinking. If you're a venture capitalist or you're a corporate board member and you're looking at the numbers and saying, why are you spending this money on your office space? Or why are you spending this amount of money here in this market when you can spend considerable less, having your team based, let's say, in the Southeast, right? And I think those are more the conversations you're going to wind up seeing over time. I think it's a whole lot of things. I mean, San Francisco is, and really the greater San Francisco area, the prices just skyrocketed up there because of demand, right? And if you don't have demand to say, hey, I need you here, or you need to be here in this vicinity, and you're just all remote, and Twitter being the perfect example, you're saving money on not having to be restrained by the commitments of your job, and then the company's saving money by not having to have so much
of a premium. Right, they have to pay a premium because you're in that cost of living zone. Joe, we had an interview a couple months ago now, before COVID and everything, with Sid Sibrandy. Sid is the CEO of GitLab. I don't know if you know GitLab. They've raised about $270 million. They're a unicorn, big in DevOps. You know, they have about 1,200 people. Well, they had 1,200 people then, Joe, and they probably have more now. And they had 1,200 different offices. They never actually had an office. They even Sid works from home, and you know, he gave an interview on this for us, and what he said is, unless you're the biggest, like Fortune 50 kind of companies, there's no way you could have enough offices around the world to be wherever the talent is around the world. Yeah. There's not enough talent in San Francisco, and it's very expensive, and it's very transient, right? They hop around. So the only way to do it is work from home.
Yeah, and what I expect you'll wind up seeing some companies do is have their headquarters or their home offices in maybe certain regions if you're a larger company, and you know, a place where you can go to work and you can go for meetings, and a place where the executives are consistently, at least from a leadership perspective. I think you're going to start to see more hybrid models. I think that's just one of them that, you know, I've heard about. But in South Florida, we've also seen a lot of companies start looking at that. Especially if it's a smaller company and, you know, they don't need to be spending overhead. You also have a lot of companies that do service-based models where they're charging by hour, and your hourly billing, you know, includes some overhead in there. So if you can save some money on that, I think that's going to be what people start going to. And the real estate market, I think, is the core of what we're talking about here. There is going to be a lot of changes in the real estate market, I think, in the next year on residential and commercial. I don't want to speak too soon about it. I mean, but, you know, I'd keep my eye on it.
Yeah, I wouldn't. I don't know if I'd be investing in commercial real estate. I mean, our lease here is for 3.5 years. We're not going anywhere, but I don't think our people are ever going to come back full time, like every day. I think people will start coming back maybe 2 days a week, 3 days a week at most, and it's going to be a rotation shuffle. So, is what it is. Joe, we don't have a lot of time left, but can you give our people, maybe a little bit of our audience, give them a flavor of the kind of activities that you're doing over at Palm Beach Tech?
Yeah, I mean, in the last 3 months, we've very much shifted our programming to virtual, as I think a lot of people would expect. And we ultimately got down to doing 5 different online events a week. We would do a community coffee, and about 45-minute event on Monday, a tech talk, which is like a TED talk for technology, 15 minutes. We started a podcast, you know, in about a couple weeks. And thanks to your team as well for being a part of that and making that successful. You know, and we're doing workshops and, you know, peer groups for some of our different leaders. You know, and it was tough, but, you know, we put the numbers together the other day, and we wound up getting a 50% increase at minimum across the board on all of our online properties. So our website traffic increased 50%. Our Facebook traffic increased 150%. Our LinkedIn traffic 50%. So, you know, we started saying, yeah, but we're started saying, all right, well, you know, we're here. Our job is to serve our members. Our members are our constituents. Yes, they pay us, but we have a mission. We have a mission to build our South Florida tech community. And that mission does not go away because there is something else going on in the world. And, you know, we saw most recently in the events of this past week, you know, after the tragic death of George Floyd in Minnesota, you know, a lot of retrospective thought in, you know, what are we doing in our communities, and what are we doing in our realms that we have control over to make sure there is equality and diversity and inclusion in every step of the way. And, you know, we have a community creed that talks about being in a very, very inclusive organization as much as we possibly can be, and not just for us, but all of the groups we associate with and all the groups we work with. We actually took a larger and a deeper dive with our board. And I sent an email to our board the other day and said, listen, we're recruiting new board members right now. We need to add another layer of people here. We need to rethink this, because we need to make sure that we put diversity at the forefront of our organization from the top down. So, you know, we're constantly trying to evolve our organization. So Palm Beach Tech as a group of people is, you know, a very passionate group of technology professionals who believe in something. We believe that South Florida will become the 21st century innovation hub we've all dreamed of. But we also have to be at the forefront of the world around us. We have to be online. We have to meet our members and our constituents where they are. We have to understand that the world, it has its problems. We can be part of a solution. We can't be the magic bullet of everything, but we have to do our part. And I think that's something that we've taken a good leadership role over the past couple months. But I got to tell you, as CEO of this group, we go into the unknown sometimes, and we put together an event, and we fingers crossed, we knock on wood, just because we're trying to do something right for the tech community. And sometimes there's a little bit of an uncertainty there, but our hearts and minds
Certainly
are really
is.
in the right place for you,
We're in
because
the right
we got
place.
people like you.
Absolutely. Hey, Joe, man, keep doing what you're doing. Good stuff. We got to bump out of here, but Palm Beach Tech, if you're looking to move somewhere, good weather, little decent cost of living, and a vibrant, growing tech community, check out Palm Beach Tech and get a good background of where we are. Joe, fantastic having you on. Thank you very much, and we'll be in touch. All righty. This is Alan Schimmel for TechStrong TV. We're going to be right back with our next guest.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more. ContainerJournal.com is operated by MediaOps Inc., the team behind DevOps.com, Digital Anarchist, SecurityBoulevard.com, DevOps Connect, and DevOpsDozen.com.
As I mentioned, this is our Something Old from TechStrong Con as we continue to replay a lot of the sessions that took place last week. This one is, look, it's funny. They did it with tongue-in-cheek, but it's really a great session to learn from. It features my friend Baruch Sodegursky from JFrog, of course, and Baruch is a character, man. I just love talking and hanging with him. And Baruch is joined by his sidekick, Leonid Igolnik. And, they're in togas. I got to warn you, they're wearing togas. And this is DevOps at Scale, a Greek tragedy in 3 parts from TechStrong Con. Excellent presentation. I think you're going to like it. Let's now go to it.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this talk. We're going to talk to you about DevOps at Scale, the Greek tragedy in 3 acts.
DevOps and Greek tragedy has a lot of in common. I think the most important one is what do you expect of it? Everybody dies.
That's right. The traditional Greek tragedy, everybody has to die at the end, and ours, well, maybe slightly different. We are in North America. After all, we do like happy endings here.
We'll get to it. Let's dig into the prologue, and we'll talk, the usual stuff like introductions.
So my name is Leonid Igolnik. I am an engineering executive. I had the joy of running engineering for a number of SaaS products at companies like Taleo and Oracle, and most recently run engineering in one of the vendors in the DevOps space, in the monitoring space or the observability space, company called SignalFX, where we were helping companies on their journey towards more modern, more repeatable, and more reliable software delivery model, leveraging the cloud.
And I'm Baruch Sodegursky. I work for a company called JFrog. You probably heard about stuff like Artifactory and JFrog X-Ray. Those are all tooling in the DevOps world as well. I'm head of DevOps advocacy there, and what it means that I'm doing this. You should find us on Twitter, and Leonid Igolnik is at Eligolnik on Twitter.
And Baruch is at jbaruch.
And next is the most important slide of today's talk, and this is jeffrog.com/show notes. If you go there, you'll find a special page for TechStrong conference in the top of the page. On this page, you will find those slides. You will find this video. You will find all the links. Everything that we are going to mention will be there as well. A place to comment, to rate this talk, and very, very attractive raffle that you should join. Now, the convenient thing about this link is it's simple. You can always remember it, and it is in the bottom of each and every slide,
right there.
Oh,
there,
the technology is amazing. Okay,
there,
it's right there. So jeffrog.com/show notes, and also, by the way, our Twitter handles are there as well, in case you decide to follow us, and you really should.
Or in case you have a question that you want to ask us on Twitter.
Well, you will have to follow us. That's exactly my point. All right.
So let's start. Let's start by defining what the hell the DevOps is. And because Greek loved Venn diagrams, we have a Venn diagram for you, right?
Here we go.
Like, here's the traditional one. People describe DevOps as an intersection of development, operations, and QA. Now, in this talk, we're going to take a slightly different angle of what DevOps is. And we're going to talk a bit about that as an intersection of technology, process, and people, because we fundamentally believe if our organization wants to adopt DevOps, they have to embrace those three dimensions and think about them more so than they think about the traditional pillars of software engineering.
I recently heard a new description that actually works works better, and that's like 3P. It's the process, people, and either platform or products. So it'll be like PP and P.
PP and P.
Yeah, PP and P. And talking about stuff beginning with P, our imaginary example that we are going to leave the strategy of DevOps with is Pentagon Inc.
Pentagon Inc. is this mythical company, and we'll tell you all about that company in a minute by starting our first act of this tragedy, and we call it Fire Brigade, aka Reactive Operations.
So before the action starts, let's set the stage and let's see what actually happens in this reactive ops stage of a company. People?
So let's start with people. You know, it's a start. It's a new company, like any other new startup in this day and age. The three founders, they come from a heavy on-premise background. They used to work in defense, so they were very constrained. Not a lot of SaaS adoption when they were in that professional part of their journey. So that's where they're coming from, and they're smart people. Like they built some really good stuff.
And one of the reasons they came out and want to start something new is to play with new technologies. So although they come from a traditional and more of constrained environment, now they go all the way. They do fun stuff like JavaScript and Node.js and reactive and microservices. They deploy. Yep.
Kubernetes, like they go to the conferences, they hear what hipsters doing. You know, after years of being constrained by the confines of on-premise software and the defense technology, they wanted something cool. So they got cool. Let's talk a bit about process. Well, what kind of process do you expect at the company of three people? They don't need more than Kanban.
If at all.
Yeah, maybe if we're lucky in Jira, if we're not lucky, sticky notes somewhere.
Yeah, Trello sounds like a good pick for a three-people company.
Now, they were smart people, right? They experienced engineering professionals, so they know some of the best practices, right? They start day one with things like TDD, unit testing, integration testing. So they starting to lay the foundation for the future day one, rather than unlike a lot of other places where we've seen that, discovered that they've inherited a lot of that debt and try to repay it later.
Yeah, so good calls for ops. Again, talking about them going to conferences and learning new concepts. A couple of the concepts that they believe will make their life easier. They're, just to remind you, they come from development background, so not really operations. They embrace stuff like serverless and no ops, just because they don't know how to do ops and they don't want to do ops. So instead, no ops sounds like fun.
Now let's talk about the tools or the platform, right? So fairly basic at this stage of the company. Jira, GitHub for source control, Travis CI. If you haven't heard of it, it's one of the in the cloud, as they say. Integration, continuous integration service. Circle CI is another example, or Jenkins is another example. And they've chosen to use AWS as their deployment platform, right? That's the beginning of the company. Pretty simple.
Yeah, and those are just the names that we throw here. It can be completely different stack, but doing exactly the same. They can use Trello instead of Jira. They can use Bitbucket or GitLab instead of GitHub. They can use Circle CI or DevOps JFrog pipelines instead of Travis. And they can use any serverless platform those days instead of AWS. This is all basically the same. It doesn't change what happens. It's just a matter of personal preference, maybe price, maybe where they get their like credits better and this kind of stuff.
That's right. Well, like any other tragedy in theater, now let's see what the action looks like in this first act, the fire brigade. Obviously, being a startup, when they start, they spend a lot of their time working on their first prototype and the minimal viable product, and they wait and they wait
for
and they keep waiting.
Customer.
Right? That's right. And, at some point, and what does the startup do when they sign up their first customer? That's very exciting part of that journey. Well, you celebrate.
Yeah, they drink a lot, they celebrate. Friday night, everybody are super happy with their first customer. Everybody, like the three founders, they are super drunk, and then customer calls.
What happens when the customer calls and tells you, what, gents and ladies, the thing I just bought from you just stopped working?
And this
what do you do?
Yeah, this customer, for our example, and this is going back to what Pentagon Inc. does that I think we did mention. They are in payment process business. And they sign up a celebrity, Instagram celebrity that now sells their swag or whatever consumer products they have, and actually do all the processing through their platform. And this is obviously a huge win for them. And now the celebrity calls and says nothing works. So what's going on? Panic.
Well, what do you do when you get a call like that? You panic.
Obviously.
And then the three founders go, well, listen, this is our first customers. We have to do what we have to do. And they charge.
Yeah, and remembering their very simple setup, it's quite understandable what they're going to do and how they approach it. So obviously they try to log into their production servers and they start looking for the logs to...
Hey, where are the logs?
Which log are you talking about? We have microservices. It's like 20 microservices. Each microservice have their own log.
Oh, wait, they're not in the same place?
No, they're not in the same place because we have different services and each server have logs in their own place.
Okay, let's gather them all together. It's like, wait, hold on a second. I see an error here. It's at 2 a.m.
Yeah, I see a similar backlog, but it actually refers to 5 p.m.
How could that be?
Well, it's time zones.
That's right.
Yes. Your service actually logs everything in UTC, and my service records the local time zone, so this is why we see that happening.
That never happened, I'm sure, to any of you.
Yeah, no, that's only us.
We love playing time zone acrobatics. So our heroes play some time zone acrobatics. And they figured out that, one of the founders, we'll call them Alex, went home after the party and committed something.
Well, yeah, they've been a little bit high on alcohol and maybe other substances as well. It's California, everything is allowed. So it's kind of a very strange commit that doesn't really make sense. And now all we want to do is just revert it. I mean,
that's all right. It should be easy, right? We say we have source control, we have CI. Let's roll it back. But wait. It doesn't build.
No, that cannot happen because it builds like a couple of hours ago.
No, you're right. I know. It says it's missing this thing. Something about left pad.
Oh, here you go. Now we have a missing dependency that was there a couple of hours ago, but now vanished for multiple reasons. So you might heard about the left pad story when someone just deleted a very popular library from npm registry. It might be that our central repository is just down now and we cannot build anymore. It can be for various reasons, but basically we discover now that builds are not reliable, and rebuilding what we built previously is not a very simple thing to do.
So what do? I guess we go to the Internet Archive, find the library, and through hard work, put this thing together. And all three heroes at some point figure out where to get the missing dependencies, roll back the commit, and get the code restored.
Which is nice. We have this feeling of accomplishment in the morning. We prevailed. Everything is back working. The customer is not too upset with us. But the problem is, it keeps happening. Over and over again, we find ourselves in this mode of firefighting, and it might be even the same problem, or it might be different problem every time, but it's just like that. Every now and then, couple of times a week, usually during the night, or when we have more important work to do, we have this firefighting duty that we keep going back to.
Well, and that brings us to our next act. Right? It's called the smoke alarms installers, aka the reactive improvement, which is the next stage of any company evolving its practices. Let's see what happens during that phase. Let's set the stage.
Yeah, so let's see what's happening. So first of all, those three founders, they raised some money, and now there are 26 developers, and one of them actually has a ops background, so they're a 30 people company, and they have around 100 customers, big and small, so they managed to retain this important customer, but also get some new ones. They now
have a support team. Like the engineers got tired of answering the phone calls as the first line of defense, so they hired a support team. That's pretty much it. The most interesting thing about this phase for me is the company realized that this whole DevOps, no ops, serverless movement where there is no server, well, there is a server, just somebody else's server in the cloud, is not a thing.
Yeah, let's see how it affects the process actually, right? So first of all, the development process kind of evolves as well. We cannot rely on the sticky notes anymore, so we build something more credible like Scrum.
We also evolve our testing practices.
And this is because we discovered running unit tests are not enough. We actually need to see how this product is used and then reverse engineer it and automate it in the tests.
Yep. So they have exploratory testers and folks that specialize in testing software professionally.
And of course, what you just mentioned, Leonid, actually they got a guy who knows that no ops is bullshit and there is always ops. So now it's great because someone can actually take care of it.
They have also realized that waking up everybody at that team size when something goes bump at night is not viable. So they now have a developer on call, a rotating position where somebody goes on call so they can be the first line of defense. They have they have a laptop on them, they have mobile internet connection, and within several minutes from being paged, they get online and start troubleshooting the issue.
And just to remind you about the incident with the logs and the time zones, obviously now on all the logs are in UTC, and so at least that problem we won't have anymore. Let's also look at how the tools evolved, right? So obviously they have 10 times more people, and knowledge sharing start to become a problem. So something like Wiki, Confluence, just shared nodes, anything that will allow sharing information better. Sources are still sources, CI are still CI. Tool for managing artifacts, both so they will have their dependencies ready, and frankly, something that will store the artifacts that they deploy. So the rollback will just be, take the previous artifacts and put them in production. And obviously, I'm here to remind you that JFrog Artifactory is such a tool, and You definitely should check it out if you didn't yet. The runtime platform is still the same. What else is new? Logging?
Obviously, they figured out that they need to aggregate logging together. And here's an example of one of the logging solutions. But as Baruch said, by no means it's an endorsement of a particular logging solution. There are a lot of choices out there. And then most importantly, they've got this very sophisticated, like top of the line, world-class monitoring tool called the Pingdom. And if you don't know what Pingdom does, it's as simple as periodically connecting to your URL, a URL, whether it's your website or some specific endpoint on the website, and trying to figure out if it's still up or not. Not the most sophisticated monitoring in the world, but at least it should help you find out whether your site is down before the customer calls support.
Yeah, so this is good. That's why I'm much better than they had before. And now let's talk about the typical action on our second act. And but just to remind you, the folks raised money. What does
the startup do when they raise a round? Well, naturally they celebrate again.
Yeah. So again, drink, have fun.
Party.
Friday, 3 a.m. Customer calls. Well, nothing works, they won't say now, because you remember we have Pingdom. So if all the entire system is down, we'll know by now, but something doesn't work. Let's say, a reminder, it's a payment processing company. So let's say Visa and MasterCard work just fine, but for some reason, the American Express transactions fail.
So what do you do when you get a customer call like that and something doesn't work, something important doesn't work? Well, the first thing you do is naturally, panic, right? And then you charge.
Yep.
Except that this time it actually is slightly different than before. We have a developer on call. So when the call comes in, the support team escalates to the developer on call. We have a knowledge base, so the developer on call can look at the knowledge base to see if we've encountered this problem before. We have logs in one place, so it's easy to see what's going on. And we have reproducible builds, right? So we have all the artifacts if the developer needs to experiment. Now, what the developer finds is there's some kind of queue thing not looking right, but he doesn't know what to do himself or herself. They just started at the company. So the developer calls the subject matter expert that we also now have in our wiki. For each area of our system, we've designated who are those SMEs. And in our case, it happens to be the same Alex again.
Yep.
So the developer on call calls Alex, and Alex starts looking into the problem together with him.
And Alex vividly remembers how they fixed this very same problem a couple of days ago, and how they enlarged this queue, and how it solved the problem, or maybe didn't solve the problem, but maybe not.
No, it certainly solved the problem that time, but it feels like it's a Groundhog Day again, because we are at this problem again and again. So what do? Well, they flush the queue because it's overflowing badly, and they increase it, and they go back to bed. Now, something new starts happening at the company at this stage, right? On Monday, when everybody gets back and they're all relaxed, slept off, calm, they get together to do a root cause analysis. They get together to talk about what caused this incident and what are we going to do differently in the future to make sure that that incident doesn't happen again. At the end of a meeting like that,
so before we get to the end of the meeting like that, there is an example of a root cause analysis report that is created during this meeting. And if I'm not in error, this is actually a real life report from one of your products, Leonid.
Indeed. We had a particular issue, and if you can see, and we'll highlight some of the key areas of a good incident report. Things didn't work as well, and we, at the end of the issue, got together and analyzed that. So in this incident report, the key items to record when did the issue happen, right? When did it start? When did it stop? It's very important to record that. How long the service was affected. Then at the section at the bottom of the screen, you can see this thing called the events, right? Almost like a timeline. And if you think that, we have a legal secretary like sitting there and typing notes feverishly, like where the timeline is coming, it's not the case. The more common pattern for that timeline is to come out of a chat tool of some kind, maybe a dedicated incident channel on Slack, or maybe you have a channel on Microsoft Teams or whatever your collaboration tools dedicated to incidents. So as people
if we do it with voice on Zoom, let's just make sure that it's recorded so we can review it and actually build a timeline from there.
That's right. So, the timelines typically get extracted out of some kind of collaboration tool. The next section is also very important. It's the section of symptoms. And the reason you need that section is because this incident report is going to be in your knowledge base. So if something similar happens again, you can search for it by the symptoms and find what was done previously, and not having to rely on the memory of the individuals.
Yeah, so if our American Express transactions are timing out with a very specific error again, we can actually find that as a symptom and know that we have the problem with the queue.
That's right. Then we have the what happened, like the description of the team's analysis as to what really happened during that incident. And then we go to the most important section of the incident report, the root cause. Right? We identified the root cause. In this particular case, the queue was not sized correctly in our example, right? And we identified next steps. And ideally, those next steps are very concrete, very trackable. And like, for example, right here, you can see that we have a link into the Jira system that will record the progress of the remediation.
Yeah, and in our example, it will be just increase the queue, basically. Right.
It's, or perhaps a bit more, but certainly increasing the queue is logical. But one of the questions the team is asking themselves is, we got to increase the queue, but to what?
42.
Why 42?
Well, because we are just guessing, aren't we?
I guess. And that's another lesson that we're learning here. The team has to continue to guess some of their remedial actions because they're still lacking some of the tools which we will describe later in the talk. So the most important part of this phase of smoke alarm installing or continuous improvement is this retrospective. And this retrospective is important for evolving your internal processes, or it's even more important to get at times your customers comfortable with what happened and making sure that they're comfortable that you're doing something to ensure it doesn't happen again. And some of you may say it's crazy. Like, what are you going to take this incident report and like show it to a customer? That's like embarrassing.
Yeah, it's embarrassing, and you might assume that you will lose some business over it because, it is embarrassing.
Yeah. Having said that, though, at least in my experience, that level of directness and transparency with your customers, as long as you are able to demonstrate that you understand the root cause and it's not a repeatable thing that continues to happen and you have a plan to figure out what happened, customers will trust you. And actually, it will build a much stronger relationship between you and your customer, whether it's external or internal. And we have a great example for you of a major issue. And Baruch and I live in the Valley, and this was happening daytime. And we were watching one of the major vendors in the source control space, GitLab, just went down, and they lost a bunch of data. They lost, I think, 8 hours of data or something like that, maybe more.
I think 6, yeah.
6 hours of data. And, for a SaaS vendor, the biggest risks, reputational risk from a security breach or losing customer data. It doesn't get any worse. And,
so let's see what GitLab actually shared of this retrospective for you to understand that whatever you share won't be as embarrassing as that. So let's see. Here are the problems. So the first problem is, what system goes down. We need to go to the backup. No one knows where the backup is. Once they Once they find the backup, it looks like all the backup files are empty.
But wait. They had disk snapshots, I remember.
Yes. So, first of all, what happened is why they have the dumps empty, because they run wrong version of the database.
Oops.
Of the tool that actually takes the snapshots. So NoSQL dumps were made. Disk snapshots, yes, but not for database servers.
Then they also found that the data center disaster recovery and replication procedure was basically built out of duct tape and baling wire, which nobody knew how it works and nobody could troubleshoot it or monitor it.
Yeah, and the S3 backups are all the bucket is empty. No S3 backups were done. So to summarize, 5 backup replication techniques, none are working in the first place.
That I don't know about you, but the reaction I would be having both as a customer or as a head of engineering would be something like this.
Yeah,
and
so 6 hours old backup. That's what they had to. Get up.
So you would think that the with this level of transparency and that type of incident, that's the end of their business. But no. And the way they handled the communication was the community embraced them, right? Here's that team member number 1, who is the key hero in this incident report. They got cards from all kinds of companies, Google, CodeFresh, I think. And at the end of this, not only team member number 1 didn't get fired, right? Because the companies learned its lesson and they're fixing the root cause, which is the process. He also got his promotion that he was expecting. And coincidentally, he also updated his Twitter description to his new role at the company, which is the database removal specialist at GitLab.
Yeah, so amazingly, the tolerance of your customers to your screw-ups is extremely high. And it's extremely high as long as you demonstrate those 2 important properties that Leonid mentioned. That you learned from it, and that you understood it, and that you learned from it. And
you took steps to make sure it doesn't occur again.
Yes. So once you guarantee that, you can get away with almost everything at least once.
Typically no more than once.
Also, yeah.
So it's time for us to take the company to its next stage of evolution. And that's the culmination of our strategy. We'll call it the perfect storm.
What happened? What changed?
Well, let's find out. So company grew again and raised another round, and now they have 74 engineers. They're continuing to grow their operations team, like it's a team now. They even hired like one whole human body of performance engineer.
I don't know where they found them, but they got it somehow.
They now have a chief architect. Ooh, that's typically scary for a lot of people. There's a lot of commandments that are about to come from that chief. They created a new team within engineering. They call it the customer success team. And the role of the customer success team is to be interrupted. So when issues come into engineering from all kinds of departments, support, pre-sales, et cetera, depending on your business, there's one small team that gets interrupted and tries to triage and route it to the right place and to answer the most common questions, right, to improve the efficiency of that process. In addition to that, that's the team now that builds the relationship with the external stakeholders and works with them routinely, as opposed to the developer on call that may be going on call once a week.
And also they are a mixed bunch, so they have people with different backgrounds that specialize on different aspects of the system. So they are now not a developer on call, but instead a bunch of subject matter experts on call, if you wish.
Mm-hmm.
It's about time to get legal, right? We're negotiating complicated contracts. We have all kinds of liabilities, and we can start thinking about the next step, maybe exit for our startup. So we need to make sure that everything is well managed from a legal perspective in our startup as well.
Like any other company that continues to grow and has a bit more money at their disposal, they now have a CFO.
We need to manage this money.
And they've been a successful company. They've grown. They've got about 1,000 customers by now, right? So they're continuing to grow.
The process obviously evolves dramatically in this kind of leap from 30 people to 100 people. First of all, they have 10, 12 Scrum teams. So running Scrum separately in silos doesn't work anymore.
They have evolved their testing process as well. They're now a dedicated system testing team, or the systems team. And no, that's not centralized QA like some of you may be thinking. This is a team whose job it is to enable quality in other teams. So they build tools, they build tool chains, they may be building load generators or anything else that may be appropriate for the business. But that's the team whose job it is to promote the best practices of testing, and they enable those best practices throughout the engineering team.
And mentioning outrageous teams, here's an ops team, which is obviously cannot exist in DevOps. So how this works?
Well, nobody who advocates for DevOps as a set of processes says that you don't need to specialize. You know, the DevOps transformation of the company is about having interconnects across those teams, but you need to have specialists in their respective domain. Even though we're no longer managing physical servers because we're in the cloud, you still have to manage an AWS bill. You still have to deal with monitoring, observability, SLA calculations, deployment tools. And much like the system test team, the job of the operations team or the SRE team, possibly site reliability engineering, is to build those tools and enable other organizations, other teams within engineering to be successful by taking advantage of those tools self-service.
So yeah, so those people again are in the empowered teams, they on the ground, they work with the rest of the organization to build those practices, to employ those tools, to build pipelines that allow DevOps and allow this flow of software from code to production seamlessly. Escalation path. Again, so now we are a lot of people. We have complicated processes. We have complicated tools. People need to know where to go when shit hits the fan. So, yeah, go ahead.
I think that's important, because in the middle of the big incident, you know, the SMEs have to do the firefighting themselves, but somebody has to start thinking about communicating progress to the rest of the company, or possibly think about how to communicate to customers, maybe update a status page, etc., etc.
And it might go all the way to a very top level executives, all the way to the CEO. But why CEO would be on the escalation path?
I think it's very important that the escalation path goes to the CEO for several reasons. Number one, for a really big incident, at some point the CEO needs to know, and for a perception reason, because I've worked in a number of organizations where if it says you have to wake up the CEO after 8 hours of a certain severity of an incident, it's amazing how many incidents manage to get resolved prior to that deadline.
It's like a magic. Very nice.
It's magical.
Okay, another very scary word is stuff like SOC 2, and that's compliance right there.
That's right. The company is bigger. You may be playing in some regulatory environment or regulated environment. We have some new privacy laws like CCPA. So you now have to start thinking about not just about delivering the software, but delivering it such that it enables the compliance of your customers, or you have to be compliant yourself because you may be, let's say, audited by a regulatory authority.
And of course, the contribution of the chief architect, the non-functional backlog. Tools obviously evolve once again, and you can see that, well, the basics are still there. We're still using Jira, Confluence, GitHub, or whatever you selected for that. In new pieces, a configuration management.
Yep. The configuration management becomes very important because typically as you continue to grow, you're dealing with many more environments, whether it's your dev, staging, multiple production environments, possibly deployed in different regions. And it becomes extremely important to make sure that you understand how the configurations are managed across those environments, and you have some kind of centralized process for that.
And once we evolving our tools, one of the important differences is now getting a real APM instead of this weird pingdom that we used to deploy.
That's right. And then, of course, there's one other big thing that has evolved. Our hero, Alex, got promoted, and they are now a VP of engineering in charge of the entire team.
By the quality of the card they get from their team, you can gauge how Alex is loved and respected. But you know what? Let's get to action. So you remember the folks raised money again, and as you already know, what do they do when they have a reason to celebrate?
They party naturally, and then something different happens.
Well, it's just nothing happens.
Friday, they go through Saturday, Sunday, Monday. Things are quiet.
Yes. But Monday.
Tuesday, I think.
Well, it might be, but in the end of the day, now Alex got a call from the head of development, and the problem
head of legal, I think.
From legal. The problem is that legal start digging into our code base and into the documentation, and it finds that we use artifacts with dependencies with license LGPL 2.2.
Yeah. They also recently visited a conference, and they have conferences much like that where they talk about exciting things.
Сказал, надо перезаписать. Да. Давай, еще раз этот слайд. Да. So, yes, Tuesday now, and Alex got a call from legal, and their legal went to a conference where legals are, and that sounds like fun. And he comes back.
Hey, listen, they talk about exciting things like protecting IP, using non-viral licenses in your code base. I am excited about it.
And apparently the legal of Pentagon is excited as well, especially about the non-viral open source licenses. And he heard the thing about open source licenses, and they come back and they're like, hey, by the way, Alex, do we use LGPL 2.2?
What does Alex do?
Well, what Alex usually does.
But then Alex remembers that they're the head of engineering, and he takes the entire team and sends them to charge.
And to look for licenses. So the entire engineering team now are spending their valuable time in reviewing dependencies, seeing the descriptors, searching in the internet for the right licenses, finding inconsistencies between what's in the archive and what the internet says and what it is in the license file, and basically in the end of the day try to build a consistent picture of how license management or how license lists look like for what they're using in production.
But the fun continues. The next day, Alex gets a call from the company CFO. And the CFO says, hey, Alex, we need to determine our cost of hosting budget for
like a cloud
for the
cloud
next year.
expenses.
That's right.
And Alex does what Alex does.
And then?
Well, 42. I mean, we will spend 42 on cloud next year.
Why 42? Asks the CFO.
Alex likes this number because it's both prime and power of 2 in the same time.
And in reality, he doesn't have anything better to tell him what the production cost at this stage should be. And he also knows that no CFO has ever declined as the customer continues to grow to give more money to host those customers. So
then something else happens.
The day after, Alex gets a call from a head of sales and says, hey, Alex, we have this prospect. And they're bigger by 2 orders of magnitude than anything we have sold or serviced before. Do you think we can handle their business?
So they ask, will it scale? As obviously the commercial from Blendtec asks, will it blend? So will it scale, Alex? And the answer is, after a couple of seconds of hesitation, of course it will. Just to remind you, Alex was one of the original developers who wrote this system, and they truly believe that whatever they wrote is actually be able to scale any load.
How does he know?
Well, because they built it, so they are very confident that it will work.
Got it. So it's pretty much 42.
And guess what?
They didn't.
It did not hold.
Everybody died.
And
Like
this
a good
is,
Greek, a good Greek tragedy.
yeah, everybody died. But as you already mentioned in the beginning, Leonid, we are in the state of Hollywood, so we don't like sad endings.
That's
let's
right.
Let's try and pivot the Greek tragedy into a Hollywood happy ending.
Let's do it. And we'll talk about the next phase, or the last phase on this evolutionary scale, which is Smokey the Bear, aka the proactive improvement stage of the company development. Let's talk a bit about what happens at that stage.
What does it take to be able to prevent those problems before they actually happen?
So in process, you start seeing emergence of things like performance and scalability testing. In legal, you start seeing tools that allow you to manage your licensing and security vulnerability review on an ongoing basis, right? So you're not surprised when somebody asks the question. On system operations, you start leveraging tools like APM to proactively and continuously review the system trends so you can forecast utilization, project things like cost of unit economics, and all other related items, so you can be better at planning. At development backlog, you start tackling things like non-functional definitions of done, right? What does it take to get a service or a component or a new capability into a production, not just from a functional perspective, right? It must do A, B, and C, but also a non-functional perspective. Things like it must be monitorable, it has to scale, it has to be auto deployable, it has to be restartable, it has to be blah, blah, blah. And those ideally as patterns are not only just documented in a big document that the architecture team brought off the mountain, like the 10 Commandments, it's also ideally incorporated into some kind of standard set of platform capabilities. So a new team building a new service can just automatically inherit those and use them in a new service.
And for make it real, when we talk about those tools, you can think about a Docker base image that already has those endpoints for logging, for monitoring, and a bunch of sidecars that do network routing through service meshes and incorporate those non-functional requirements into something that you can just take and use, and it works automatically out of the box. Tools evolve as well, obviously. So now on top of configuration management, we use stuff like JFrog Mission Control to be able to know what is deployed where, what is the success and failure ratio of promotions. In JFrog X-Ray, you not only start now analyzing your security, but also use it for compliance. On the QA front, you start doing testing in the cloud with cloud loads, with stuff like Sable as Meter and others. And obviously, just again, this is not a complete list, and you can pick and choose your tools. What you need to remember is that those are the constraints that you need to have in mind by now. And the next question would be, we keep getting back to those guessing games, and how do we know, for example, what a budget can be, or how do we plan our time?
Well, for that, we're gonna give you a tool, one of the most sophisticated tools that requires a lot of experience and expertise to make those things, and it's called Excel. I know it's surprising, but you don't need to have super sophisticated tools to be able to do what the most important part of this phase, which is data-driven continuous improvement, right? And we'll give you a couple examples.
This is again from your project, Leonid, and this comes to effort allocation. So let's say we have a sprint, and this sprint is called the Big Feature A. this is the goal, this is what everybody should work with. And if you, as a manager of this team, need to guess how much effort goes into this big feature A, you would say 42 or maybe 80% of the time people actually work on this feature. But is it really true?
Or maybe a different example, right? Any product that is out there has some ongoing maintenance to do and needs to work on quality. So what's the right amount of effort to allocate to quality so you can still meet some kind of criteria that you've established for yourself without either spending too much or too little?
And here's another example from one of your projects, and this is how you filter, how you measure the quality of your product. And
so normally one measures that by watching the defect trends, right? And you kind of hopefully you have a good definition of those defects by severity. And this is an example from one of the products where using data, right, to make a decision was of great help for us to continue to evolve our process. So in this case, you'll see over one particular quarter, the distribution of defects by P1 and P2. And you'll see that there are a lot of P1s and P2s that are coming into the organization, right? And if you look at this data alone, you could say, well,
the quality is not stellar. I'm not impressed with your work, Leonid.
And that's exactly what the head of support for that particular product told us. And we together went in and started digging into the data, and we actually recasted that same data in a different light. We looked at the data by how each of those defects was addressed. And if you look at the summary at the bottom, you'll see that only 20% of the bugs that were filed by support into engineering were fixed through a code fix. And about 52% of the bugs, like that, the resolution right there, was resolved with something we called information provided, which means we had to tell support how to go and solve that problem with the customer without changing anything in the product.
So now, instead of having a quality problem, we actually have an information sharing problem. And this now should be solved in a completely different way.
That's right. And using this data, I went ahead and together with my partner in crime, the head of product management, decided to invest about a month of a certain team's time into improving documentation, training support better, because I had this data that I could demonstrate that if we reduce those 52% to something a bit more measurable, maybe 10, 15, right, we will reclaim a lot of development time back, and we'll be able to, over time, reinvest it back into product development. So here's a great example about continuous and proactive improvement by leveraging data-driven decisions.
Amazing. And with that, let's go to Epimyth. And for those of you who didn't major in
Greek theater?
In Greek theater, Epimyth means a summary or conclusion. So let's do that.
The moral of the story. Let's talk about the moral of the story.
Yeah, and there are a couple. I think the first one is scale is a scale.
That's a weird one, isn't it? Scale is a scale. But in reality, what it means is you will not be able to scale your organization and get to that desirable state of proactive improvement, the Smokey the Bear, right? Until you go on all the previous steps on the scale. It's very rare that the organization can afford to or should start with that level of sophistication. So you always start in some kind of reactive improvement, and some organizations that never get out of that stage typically don't survive long enough to live. Then you go to that stage of proactive improvement. You find a problem, you find the root cause, you put a mitigation in place, and you move on. And only after going through all of those and layering down the processes required for those, as well as the tools required for those processes, because you need both the tools and the people to support that proactive improvement, you can achieve that. And in the survey that was done when we were writing the stock, don't despair if you don't find yourself at the top of that scale, because only 25% of organizations reach that stage of proactive improvement. About 15 are typically found in reactive, and the rest in the rest are in the reactive improvement, right? So scale is a scale, and in order to get there, you have to go on this journey. Now, the tools, the people, and the process and the sequence of those will vary by your own journey, but more or less, you will arrive at the same result over the long term.
Yeah, and in the end of the day, scale is a scale, and it's about change, and this is what DevOps is about. It's about changing the right things in the right time. It's about adapting to this change as an organization, and just a couple of I would say bumper stickers or sounds bits or one-liners to take away is, first of all, the most important mantra of DevOps: you build it, you own it. This is exactly about how teams evolve from being silos to be empowered teams of T-shaped people who own the entire process from the code all the way to production.
Of course, data is the key, as we talked about it, and ideally you have the tools that empower with your data, so it's not expensive to get it when you need it, but Excel is fine. And then last but not the least is my favorite one, so I will take that one, is pain is instructional.
And
Pain
that's
is what
underloved mantra of DevOps in particular and software engineering in general.
That's right. On that note, just a reminder, you can ask us questions, and we are also on Twitter. Baruch is at jbaruch.
Leonid is Eli Golnik.
This was TechStrong.
And you go to jeffrog.com/show notes for the slides, the video, all the links, the ratings, the comments, and the raffle that you should not miss. And with that, questions.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your time, and go and ask questions now.
Hi, it's Mitch Ashley here one more time this week as we round up the week with two engaging topics. On Thursday, June 11th at 11 a.m. Eastern, Jeff Keyes of Plutora, along with Steve Pereira, talk about transformation fails and how it pays to understand your surroundings, strengths, and gaps before you invest in what's next. Later at 1 p.m. Thursday Eastern, Micah Martin from Soul Cycle and Kendall Miller of Fairwinds going to discuss real-world examples of deploying cloud-native technology in an uncertain environment. Awesome. I hope it all goes well. If it does, maybe we have the makings of a new Netflix series. We'll see you there.
You know what? Thanks to Baruch and Leonid for that presentation. As I said, they did it tongue-in-cheek. It was really cute, funny, but also really on point with some good points there. So I hope you enjoyed that presentation. Let's now just turn quickly over to a couple headlines from our sites today. Over on Container Journal, we have Managing the Security of Cloud Native Architectures. This was a bylined article by our friend Dror Davidoff of Aqua Security. You know, Dror does it. They have some great, look, Liz Rice is at Aqua, and they've got Ronnie and Andy Fight, and Ronnie Oswald are, you know, frequent guest of ours here. But you know what, we don't often hear from Dror, their CEO, and this is a good article by him on managing the security of cloud native architecture. I think it's important, and I think you should read it, so go check that article out. And then also we have Cloudera, right? Cloudera has announced a new private cloud arrives on Kubernetes. So private cloud Kubernetes by Cloudera for private cloud people. And then we have Cradlepoint adds container support. I think we'll see that becoming more and more of a trend of vendors adding container support. Over on the Boulevard, on Security Boulevard, we have you want to protect privacy, get off social media. Indiana, that's what an Indiana federal court says anyway. Look, if you want to have perfect security, unplug your computers from the internet, right? You won't get attacked. But what I don't like is the implication that if you choose to have or if you choose to partake in social media, you can't protect your privacy. I think you do have your cake and eat it too. And that's where we have to be. I don't agree with the philosophy of if you don't want to protect your privacy, then don't go on social media. That's the same to me as saying if you don't want to have a security risk, don't go on the internet. Well, that's fine, and you could live in your cave somewhere. But anyway, count on the courts. It always takes them a few years to catch up to technology. So let's see what that's about. Also on the Boulevard, we have COVID-19 security and working from home, myths and misconceptions. Good article, especially if you're grappling with a work from home situation for your team. And then finally, over on DevOps.com, our friends at GitLab. Always something going on at GitLab. No, it's not the 22nd of the month, so it's not a new release. But they just announced that they acquired 2 different app security vendors that are both in the fuzzing space. And the article lays it all out there. We'll also, I think, have a interview with GitLab DevSecOps person around this, and that'll be, I think, on Monday's show. So stay tuned for that. Also on DevOps.com, HPE launches Aruba ESP, and then an article called Review. Good words to live by. So check those out. Anyway, as I always say, not everything that's on these sites. We have so much more. But those are just a few good headlines to get you started. Go check them out. Now, I think we're going to head over to our managing editor, Charlene O'Hanlon, who has a great interview lined up for today.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey, welcome back, everybody, to TechStrong TV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, managing editor at MediaOps.com. And I am so excited now to be having a nice conversation with Raja Rao, who is the senior director and the head of global growth at Apple Tools, right?
Yes.
All right. Right. You're also the creator and the head of the Test Automation University.
Yeah, that's right.
So what is the Test Automation University? Tell me about that first.
So Test Automation University is a global platform, education platform for test automation engineers. And it's a really fun platform. It's a site where people can go and then watch video tutorials, video courses that are instructed by some of the leading influencers and instructors in the test automation field. So it includes like Andrew Jones and Anand and myself and a whole bunch of other people who are all like who's who in the test automation university, in test automation industry. And the fun part about that is, when you're taking the course, it's not just like a boring, video platform where you just go there and you watch it, but it is really highly gamified. And as you're doing the course, there are a lot of quizzes. And you can answer those quiz questions and you get ranks and you get certificates. And we automatically generate and tweet the certificates and share it on LinkedIn as well. Oh, and we even have concept of TAU 100, which is like the Forbes 100 concept. So where we share people who take a lot of courses and earn a lot of credits, and we highlight those people. So it's a community that is built to not just educate, but also promote all the test automation engineers. It's really important. We find that the QA engineers need a lot more recognition. So we do our best using our platform to promote them, as well as educating them.
That's great. That's great. So you guys have a hackathon coming up, Apple Tools.
Yes.
So is that in conjunction with the Test Automation University, or is that separate from?
It's separate from, but it's still an Apple Tools initiative.
Okay.
It's actually started already, and so on the 27th, but it is going to go on till the end of this month. It's an online hackathon. It is for people to kind of learn about cross-browser testing and especially the Apple Tools offering of ultra-fast grid. So Apple Tools offers a very innovative, I don't use this word lightly, very innovative solution and for cross-browser testing. And the reason it's very innovative is traditionally what you do is you write a test script and then you run the test script across different browsers and across different viewports multiple times using either homegrown solutions or using one of the cross-platform, cross-browser testing, cloud solutions. So in our situation, what we have built is, instead of you running the same test over and over and over again, you can just run it on one platform and using just a Chrome browser. And then while you're running it, we take the DOM snapshot of the state of the application, and then we render it in the cloud in different browsers and different viewports automatically for you. So you run the test once, especially using like the latest Chrome browser, which is usually very reliable and fast. And then we automatically render them in the cloud, render screenshots of render the application in different viewports and browsers, and then take screenshots along the way. And we use our Eyes AI to then verify these screenshots and highlight all the differences. So it's a very holistic approach, and it's a very innovative approach. And because of that, this new approach, it's very, very fast. So we are seeing people running hundreds of tests in seconds, which usually takes minutes, and in some cases even longer than that.
So in this particular hackathon, then, what exactly are you guys looking for from your contestants? What is the purpose? I mean, beyond the cross-browser, cross-device testing, what are there specific applications that you guys are looking for, specific instances where you're using this technology, or what is what are the guts of the hackathon, if you will?
Yeah, so the guts are very simple. So we have built a demo hackathon app, which is an e-commerce app.
Okay.
It's like shoes, e-commerce apps where you can purchase shoes. And in the hackathon, what we're asking people is, we are giving them 3 tasks. So the first one is to simply find if the elements, like different fields and buttons, whether they are displayed or hidden in different viewports or whatnot.
Okay.
So that is number one. And then the second one is, we are asking them to check a functionality, like you filter for a black shoes and then see if the result shows up correctly. And then the third one, we are asking people to then verify all the visual bugs that may be present in the page. So the hackathon app itself, there are 2 versions of the app. One without any bugs, and the other one has all these bugs in it. So we are asking them, okay, write your test the traditional way, use it against the version 1, which has no bugs, and then run the same test against V2, and then see how many bugs you can find and how many bugs escape yourself, right? And then we are asking them, okay, now repeat the same process using Applitools and against using ultrafast grid, and then run against all these different viewports and different browsers, and then see how long that takes and how easy or how hard it is for you to do it using Applitools ultrafast grid. So it's basically very simple, and we want the main agenda is to get people to understand the innovation that we are bringing to the world, and also, kind of learn for themselves. Like, we don't want, everybody says our product is great, right? Every marketer, especially, they say their product is the best, the most innovative. So what we are providing the engineers an opportunity is an opportunity to test for themselves. And we are paying them, there's a $50,000 cash in rewards.
Wow.
So yeah, so the top winners are going to earn like $5,000 each. There are 2 $5,000 prizes, and then there are $2,500 prizes and $8,200 prizes. And so we are so confident that our platform is going to ultimately is going to on average outperform significantly any traditional approach they would choose. So that's why we are kind of betting so much money on this hackathon, and we want people to try it themselves. We want them to see genuinely, run it using their traditional approach that they have like 10 years of experience doing it. So let them do it, test our app using their using the traditional approach and with using all the experience that they have gotten, and then compare that with Applitools and the visual AI and cross-browser testing. So, and then they will see for themselves how good it is or how bad it is.
That's great, because it really adds an element of education in that. It's not just, it's not just doing it for the sake of winning. It's actually, they're actually learning about the technology and the process. So that's pretty nifty. So
Exactly. So even the previous hackathon, we did the same thing. We asked people to compare it with visual AI, and we gave them the very common tests that they would normally perform. And our empirical data, when they submitted the results, shows that we are like 7 times faster, 7 times better, and in terms of the time it takes to write the code, and in terms of the test stability and the number of bugs we find. So every pretty much any aspect, we are like multitudes better on a simple app. If you think about a complicated app, then it's going to be even significantly better.
So, how long does it normally take to write an app such as this? And when we're talking about, especially with the cross-browser testing, how much time would it take in a regular homegrown system versus the Applitools system? Are we talking about orders of days and weeks versus maybe minutes or hours using your solution?
Yeah, so if you compare it, like I can tell you an approximation, whether you use cross-browser or just use Applitools. If for our hackathon, for this current hackathon, it will probably take you 6-7 hours in the traditional approach, and probably half an hour in the visual AI approach, in the UFG.
Wow.
The main reason, it's not really like a magic or anything. I mean, there is magic. The magic is the AI. But the reason is the approach. It's like, comparing Tesla versus, any other, combustion, like a gasoline powered cars, because the engine is completely different, right? It's not like, we are a better gasoline car. We are basically changing the game we're basically creating an electric car, if you will, right? So that's the reason. It's like this, when you compare different aspects, like number of locators you use. So for example, in our case, all you will do is you take a screenshot of the page, right? And then our AI is going to detect if there is any problem or not. And you manage, we provide ability for you to annotate, this area, there is a bug here, there is a bug here, there is a bug here on the screenshot itself. So you don't need to deal with individual buttons, individual elements, and their positioning and their appearance, and then displayed or hidden, whatnot. So you don't need to worry about all those things. So you don't need to write code for individual elements. And when a new version comes out, even if it's completely different, usually what happens is in the traditional approach, you will end up running the same test and a whole bunch of tests fails. It's because of the change in the application. So you now need to rewrite a lot of them and then add more tests. And it's just a mess. It's like, it's just not the right way to do it. So ultimately, QA engineers suffer in their productivity, even though you are the smartest QA engineer, because you just don't have the tools, you will suffer in your productivity, right? So that's my feeling, because I was a QA engineer back, 15 years ago myself. I was leading a big team at Yahoo, and I honestly wish we had Applitools back then. So it just so makes your life so much better.
All right, great. So tell me again, when is the deadline for entry?
So the deadline is, you can start entering right now, but the deadline is June 30th. So that's the end. That's the last date before which you need to submit. Okay,
and then where do folks need to go to get more information?
So you can go to applitools.com/hackathon-apply. Or if you simply go to applitools.com, there will be a link right there on the homepage. You can click on it to enter.
Excellent. All right. Well, Raja, I wish you the best of luck with this hackathon. It sounds like it's going to be a really good one.
All right. Yeah, I hope so. Thank you.
All right. Great. All right, everybody, please stick around. Lots more TechStrong TV coming up, so stay tuned.
Disruption is occurring across every aspect of IT. Open source, cloud services, DevOps, and cloud-native software architectures are democratizing IT and radically transforming how business is done. The old ways of creating software and doing IT are being replaced with agile, flexible, faster, and cheaper methods, benefiting vendors and users alike. Accelerated Strategies Group is out to democratize access of industry expertise and knowledge. We use our expertise and experience to offer insightful, intelligent, useful information in a variety of formats relevant to the IT community, digital events, videos, reports, assessments, workshops, and implementation projects with tech vendors, IT organizations, and business leaders. We widely and openly share our work products, often for free. Analyst reports these days aren't worth more than a graph or chart that tells a story or illustrates a market trend. We work with developers, DevOps teams, cloud architects, security engineers, and transformation leaders most every day, creating and implementing transformational strategies and technologies. We're not just thinkers, we're also doers.
Okay, everyone. Thanks, Charlene, for a great interview with Raja Rao, Senior Director at Applitools. And congratulations to Applitools and the Test Automation University for a great job. Next, let's head over now to our Analyst Corner with Mitchell Ashley, where Mitchell's going to have an engineering DevOps interview with fellow ASG analyst Mark Hornbeek. Should be pretty good.
Hello, welcome to the sixth tutorial in the series Engineering DevOps Tutorials. Today we're going to cover how do you engineer value stream maps and value stream management for DevOps. I am Mark Hornbeek, DevOps the Gray, CEO and Principal Consultant of Engineering DevOps Consulting. I'm an analyst at Accelerated Strategies Group, an ambassador and author for the DevOps Institute, a blogger on DevOps.com, and author of the book Engineering DevOps. My website is engineeringdevops.com. Let's get started. So what's the agenda today? I'll explain what are value stream maps and value stream management. We'll talk about lean DevOps value stream pipeline engineering, how to create a current state value stream map and a future state value stream map in order to determine a value stream solution. And also talk about value stream management, the blueprints for creating it, best practices, and how to implement a value stream management solution. For your information, all of this is available as a white paper on my website, www.engineeringdevops.com/documents. So what's a value stream map? A value stream map is basically a visual that depicts a series of steps or stages that describe what is needed to create a version of a product or service. The stages depicted here in the diagram are just an example. Every organization may have different ways of describing their processes, and usually this is done in a group setting, and people try to understand, together how to best describe their value stream. It's not an actual detailed process map. A value stream map is more high level. It talks about the major, steps for creating value, creating a service or a software product or a release. So in this case, for this example, we have a simple value stream that starts with a backlog, then moves into a dev stage, and then a continuous integration stage, and then a delivery stage where the artifacts for deployment are prepared for deployment, and then a deployment stage, and finally operations. So this would be an example of a value stream map for a software pipeline that goes all the way from the backlog planning process all the way through to operations. So value stream mapping actually is a technique that came out of lean engineering practices long ago, long before they were applied to software in the manufacturing industry. But basically value stream mapping in this context is a technique for breaking down complex value streams and representing them as current state and also potential future state value stream maps. They give you a nice visual to show you what the project components would be or are today in the current state. So they're very valuable, powerful visual tools, basically. A value stream management system, it consists of a blueprint, tools or platforms for value stream management, and some best practices for managing end-to-end DevOps value streams. And we'll talk about both of these now. Okay, so let's talk about value stream pipeline engineering. If you take the a generic template, as I said, there's basically a value stream is a series of process steps. What you're trying to do is understand some of the key contributing factors for each of those process steps relative to whatever your goals are. Typically, the goals are improving lead time and quality. You don't want to lose quality while you improve lead time. So you draw out the major steps and try to figure out what are the contributing metrics for each of those steps, and also the inter-process steps, the wait times between steps. So there's this concept of lead time, or LT, which is the duration from the entry to the exit of each step. The LT is lead time, and PT is the process time to perform the work of the process. Notice that there is a difference between PT and LT. In other words, there's some waste going on in each step. So the difference is basically that waste. There's also non-value time between stages or steps, waiting between steps. So this might be, if it was a manufacturing line, for example, it would be people waiting for parts to be able to start their process. Or if it was software, it might be waiting to set up a test environment, for example, so that you can enter a test phase. That would be an example of a wait. Or maybe you're waiting for a meeting to complete in order to get agreement to go forward to the next stage. So then quality also is a metric that's kind of interesting. It's a ratio. It's called C/E. I think it stands for completed over actual. So the idea is that you're trying to get a measure of what percentage of the work from the prior stage was accepted without requiring rework. And this is also cumulative. As you go through the pipeline, you can accumulate that to see what your overall, C/A values are. And basically what you're trying to do is improve the end-to-end lead time and also the end-to-end quality in terms of C/A. That's typically what you're doing in a value stream. Although there are other purposes for value streams, maybe you're trying to improve other aspects, but these are the two typical ones. So we'll talk about these typical ones. So a value stream map, as we said, identifies key bottlenecks and contributing factors for both the in-stage and the wait time bottlenecks between stages, as well as the quality ratios, as I just mentioned. So this is an example of a simple value stream. Usually in a group setting, people will get together, cross-functional team, and try to figure out what their value streams are, what the value stream is, and what are the contributing factors. So if you look at this one, in the backlog stage, the team said, there's a review of priorities, requirements, and resource assignments. In the development stage, there's code inspection, unit testing, static analysis, functional testing, and rework going on. In the CI stage, there's merging with trunk, building, builds, unit tests, smoke tests, regression tests, some rework. In the delivery stage, there's mapping the images to packages, building the releases, and making the candidates for the release, and rework if necessary. In the deployment stage, you have operational reviews, approvals, releases, and rework as necessary as you deploy. Operation itself, there's operations, so there's ongoing testing, monitoring, and again, rework potentially. So the process and lead times for this particular example are listed. So in the backlog, you've got 4 hours of lead time, but only 1 hour of process time. So there's a lot of waste within that process. And you can see as you go through it, some of these stages have quite a lot of time. But what's interesting is the difference between the lead time and the process time, because that's really where there's waste that you could potentially optimize. And similarly, the values for inter-process delays. So you've got some that are like 16 hours, 8 hours, 16 hours, 12 hours. There's wait times going on. And what are those wait times consisting of? In this case, it's waiting for code and test resources. In this case, it's requesting and waiting for regression and test resources. Prior to delivery, you're requesting and waiting for packaging resources. For deployment, you're waiting and requesting and waiting for deployment resources. And finally, in operations, you're requesting and waiting for operations resources. So these are why you have wait times. These quality percentages are shown as well. It's not explaining what they are in this particular example, but there's lack of room on the slide. But basically, the idea is that there are C/A values for each of these stages as well that we can use in this example. So let's say you wanted to look at the lead time bottlenecks. What you want to do is look at the data you have and do some calculations. You look at waste within each stage. Again, you're looking at the difference between the lead time and the process time, and also the overall percentage as an efficiency. So if you do that calculation, you can see that the CI stage here has 12 hours of waste compared to some of the others that have maybe higher waste but and higher in efficiency, but the total is not as interesting. So the 33% waste for the CI stage, 12-hour waste for the delivery stage, 33% efficiency. So the efficiency is very low, whereas the development stage does have a higher waste, but in fact, it's fairly efficient. So maybe you wouldn't select that as a target for improvement. And similarly, on the inter-process non-value time, you've got some pretty large delays, 16 hours, and for that matter, 12 hours and 8 hours are quite long delays, and maybe we can do something about that. So generally speaking, what you're doing is looking for a solution to target where you want to target solutions, what stages and wait times have the highest values of waste. In this case, it's the CI stage, the delivery stage, and the wait times between CI and deployment. Similarly, for the quality side, you're doing a calculation to see, where do you have the largest concerns, and where you've got the smallest amount of acceptance of changes from the prior stage. So in this case, the dev stage is only delivering 65% acceptance to the CI stage. CI stage is only delivering 70% to the delivery stage, and deployment is only delivering 50% to operations. So overall, those are stages to target for solutions as far as quality improvement is concerned. So again, just to recap a little bit, what you want to first of all do is define some goals. Hopefully you've already defined some goals going into the process of a value stream map solution, value stream mapping session, but you probably revisit it as you go along, and it seems to be typical that when you get a group together, you start reviewing these things in detail, and your objectives tend to change a little bit. Quite often people are surprised at how long things actually take once they get together and map it all out. So it's not a bad idea to review your goals again as you decide your solution. So in this case, they decided to reduce the end-to-end lead time from 255 hours, which was the total set of all the lead times and the non-value times, and reduce that to 200 hours. So it's basically a 55-hour reduction compared to the current state. That's a goal for our future state value stream map. The second is to improve the quality by increasing the percentage of changes that do not require rework from 15 to 25%, which is 10 points. And again, this is end-to-end, not on individual stages. So 10 points improvement from the current state. So the value stream analysis tells you which stages and transitions to target to process lead time improvements and quality bottlenecks to get the largest benefits. So the analysis in summary, it looks like if you look at the lead times and the non-value add times, but if you could reduce the end-to-end lead times by 55 hours, if you take out 10 hours lead time reduction to the dev and CI stage and the delivery stages, and 6 to 14 hours reduction in most of the wait time areas by improving the wait times. Similarly, on the quality side, you can take out 10 points from the CI and delivery stage. That would give you 20 points for those stages, and an overall end-to-end reduction when you do the calculation. 10%, actually 11% it looks like, so that would meet our 10% goal. So that's kind of the approach you use to try to figure out where to target improvements. In this case, you have, in general, you have multiple possible solutions to improve the DevOps, value stream. And how does that done? Well, to be honest, an expert, or people that really know what they're doing or have done it before tend to get involved and consider, all right, well, given those are the areas you want to target, what exactly are you going to do? What changes are you going to make your processes, your people, your technologies? Maybe you bring in a new tool, maybe you bring in changes in process, or even change out some people in some cases, or the way organizations work. But generally speaking, that requires some expertise to figure that out, to try to figure out what's going to have the kind of gain that you're looking for, that you're targeting. and then you build solutions and services. You can find some of these ideas on my website, engineeringdevops.com documents. So in this particular case, the example, the expert decided that at the backlog stage, we'd include test planning and automation testing tasks in the backlog as a way to kind of streamline where you have some bottlenecks. And in the dev stage, automate unit testing and use test-driven development for functional test creation, speed up testing, because that's part of the bottleneck. The CI stage was to automate CI builds and smoke and regression tests more than they're done today. The delivery stage was to automate release acceptance testing, and the deployment stage to automate the acceptance meetings requiring release approvals using release automation technologies. And then between stages, orchestrate and build the test environments and use containers to speed up, the time required to set up the test environments and tear them down to reduce the delays. So that's kind of the capstone, if you like, of a value stream management analysis. It's usually done, as I say, in a group setting, being led by an expert that has run these things before. Certainly I've done it with lots of groups myself. Okay, let's talk about value stream management. Value stream management consists of basically a blueprint and practices, tools for managing overall value stream. So once you have a value stream and you've got your future state, how do you make sure you're managing it, if you like? If you remember back in the first tutorial, we presented a DevOps blueprint, and it's repeated here. Well, the top of the blueprint is the value stream management, so it has to do with keeping track of the total end-to-end value stream management and analysis, and providing overall capability for managing the value stream. That's really what value stream management is all about. And I'll present a blueprint for value stream management itself in a minute. So what's the blueprint? The value stream management solutions basically implement an abstraction layer over one or more value streams. So one of the neat things about value stream management, especially in this world of microservices, and you've got multiple components being orchestrated together in order to make a release. Maybe it's database components, with an application or a multi-tier application or various other things that need to be, released together to really accomplish the functionality that you want to deliver to a service or a client. So value stream management can actually be an overall management tool to keep track of multiple value streams or pipelines, working through ARA or application release automation or orchestration tools, for example. So it's very powerful especially powerful when you have multiple value streams to manage. But even with one value stream, it's a very powerful concept. It's kind of the backbone of a sophisticated DevOps environment. So why is it important to engineering DevOps? Value stream management, I shorten it as VSM. They address the following problems, and they're particularly important when you get into more, advanced and sophisticated DevOps situations like the Phoenix project, the second way, continuous feedback, or the third way, continuous improvement. You really need something as an overall orchestrator to, effectively accomplish some of those goals very well. So things such as having fragmented visibility along each pipeline from planning to operations, a value stream management solution ties that all together, provides visibility of dependencies across product portfolios with multiple pipelines. Again, it might be multiple microservices, for example. You get a view of work in progress and the aggregate of all the work, and you can be tracking work as you go along to see, from a project management point of view, how things are going from an operations point of view, or any of the stakeholders. You can get optimization across the disparate pipelines because you can see all of this and then make adjustments in near real time. It facilitates methodologies for continuous improvement because you're gathering data, and because you can have orchestration. You can, if you like, tweak your pipelines, your value streams, and continuously make improvements. Maybe change out a tool, change out a process, and do that at the value stream management level. It's a little easier than going into the weeds to do that at the detail level. So VSM also manages an application delivery process all the way from conception or inception to delivery across the portfolio of products. And it provides an ability to support your policies for governance, notifications, different people, stakeholders. Gives you an ability to collect data and get insights and analytics, as well as orchestrations across the entire value stream or set of, federated set of value streams. it's a way that would be difficult to accomplish without value stream management tools. It's possible. I see people doing it, but value stream management tools were designed for that, and that's a good way to do it. This is an actual, I'm not going to go through all this, but basically a blueprint for a value stream management tool. This happens to be one that came from a partner, one of my sponsors, Plutora. It's one of their diagrams, basically, that shows how they depict value stream management with a lot of plugins. The main, concepts here again are to provide a capability for end-to-end release planning, coordination, orchestration, shared environments management, basically, with several major capabilities, so integration or tools and common data models, so you can relate work between different groups and pipelines and value streams. Provides management and orchestration capability for planning, release orchestration, deployment orchestration, environment management, deployment orchestration to operations, and standardize the workflow regardless of the underlying tooling, so that you can swap out a tool and still have the same workflow working. It's kind of nice because it provides an abstraction layer. It also supports decision making and analytics because it's gathering all the data from the different parts of the value streams, and then can provide end-to-end visualizations, analytics, dashboards that can help you further reduce waste, improvements, and provide tracking, and validate your process times. Okay, some examples of practices, and this is a very short list. I just don't have time to go into the longer one. Again, you can look at my website for more. So an example practices, you can provide end-to-end release processes made visible and controlled. The release status or releases are made visible, enabling proactive decision making, and you generally providing visibility into impact. If you make a change, you can see immediately how that change is affecting things, whether it's a change of the pipeline or the product or your release process. So how do you engineer a value stream map solution? It's just not, this is somewhat of a generic approach, but I do recommend it. Start with doing an assessment. I actually offer value stream management assessments and DevOps assessments in my consulting practice, but start with an assessment and understand your current state, what you're trying to do, where you're trying to go, and then select a platform that matches, the assessment goals, your roadmap goals. Conduct a proof of concept on some example application, deploy it with an initial set of product applications. Be careful which applications you pick, and then optimize the solution around those, and then expand to other applications as you see fit. So that's kind of a general approach to engineering a value stream management solution. So here we are, finally, at the last slide. The question that I started with is how do you engineer value stream maps and value stream management for DevOps? So this is a long-winded answer, but basically is what we covered. After an organization has defined goals for the value stream, a current state value stream map is created, detailing lead times, process times, non-value added times, and quality ratios for each stage in the value stream. The values are used to determine the bottlenecks can be targeted for reduction to meet the goals, and then a future state value stream map is created that meets the goals, and solutions are determined that will meet the reduction targets. So the value stream management solution is selected that can provide an end-to-end value stream orchestration capability, aggregation of metrics and analytics in accordance with the engineering blueprint and engineering practices presented in this presentation and the white paper on my website. Okay, so that's it for today. Hope you learned something. If you want to learn more, you're welcome to contact me at mhornbeek@engineeringdevops.com. Grab the white paper for free off my website, or get a copy of my book at mybook.to/engineeringdevops. Thank you again for listening, and I hope to see you in the next tutorial. Thank you.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
Our final segment for today's show. is last but not least, it's our good friend Mike Verzard on his channel Roundup, where Mike is going to be interviewing Scott Sellers. Always good stuff from Mike. Mike, take it away.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey, thanks, guys. We're here with Scott Sellers, who's the CEO of Azul Systems. Scott, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Mike, very much. Appreciate your having me on board today.
Hey, I don't think a lot of people know exactly what you guys do in the land of Java, so why don't you walk us through what you're all about?
Absolutely. So Azul sells a number of different solutions that are designed to allow for predominantly enterprises to be able to more efficiently run and manage and develop their Java-based applications.
Okay. There seems to be a lot going on in the land of Java these days with different open source instances and some confusion about what Oracle is up to. Why don't you walk people through that a little bit?
Absolutely. Yeah. So, a number of years ago, the way that Java is developed changed pretty significantly. As people may remember, Java was developed quite some time ago by Sun Microsystems in the mid 1990s, actually. And Java has really flourished for literally decades. Oracle, of course, acquired Sun in 2009 and, continued the stewardship of Java. And one of the things that changed beginning around the 2018 timeframe was that instead of these, many-year gaps from one release of Java to the next, measured in 3 to 4 years, that Oracle announced a significant change in terms of how Java releases would be developed and overall maintained. And so what they announced was a move to new Java releases every 6 months. And there's actually been many benefits of this to the overall Java community because now you have a much more rapid development cycle. Oracle and the rest of the Java community, including companies like us and IBM and Red Hat and others that participate within the development of the future of Java, we've all, to the collective credit, we've all, hit those milestones exactly as planned. So every 6 months now, there is a new version of Java coming out. And it's really revitalized, I think, the developer interest in Java, the developer use of Java. Java is and remains the #1 programming language in the enterprise. And so this new cadence has really, brought a lot new attention and excitement to the Java community. So that's the good news. On sort of the challenging side of things, one of the things that also was announced in the 2018 timeframe was a change in the Oracle licensing, the license under which Java would be licensed for the Oracle distribution of the Java runtime. And the change there was that no longer was Java freely available from Oracle for commercial use for more than 6 months. And so, what that really did was change the dynamic as to how enterprises could use and consume Java. And what's happened as a result of that is there's been a dramatic shift towards open source Java solutions that are based on the large development community called OpenJDK, which is kind of akin to the Linux community, right? It's an open source development environment where many companies, Oracle obviously, but then Azul, Red Hat, IBM, et cetera, all collectively participate in the future version of Java. So what's happening is the Java community is migrating away from the proprietary restricted license distribution that Oracle provides over to a variety of OpenJDK solutions from companies like Azul and Red Hat and Amazon and others.
Does that just lower my costs as the end customer, or does it just benefit the platform providers, or what is the implications of that for the IT organization?
Well, I think at the end of the day, the exciting thing is it's about freedom of choice, right? And, in today's day and age, certainly all things being equal, developers and enterprises will choose an open source solution over a proprietary license solution for the obvious reasons that, enterprises don't want to get locked into, one single vendor. Open source, I think now is very much accepted as the default way of using and consuming software. And certainly in the case of Java, And given the very large number of individuals and companies that are involved with the OpenJDK evolution, it ultimately means that developers and enterprises have many different commercial vendors that they can look to if they need commercial support. And that's a very exciting thing for Java, because ultimately competition, differentiation is a good thing for the developers and the enterprises that need commercial support.
Do I have to worry about any kind of forking of these platforms, or will my Java app work anywhere?
It's an excellent question, and I think one of the things that the Java community in general has done is retained a collective mentality that we're all going to do this together as part of the OpenJDK project. So there is no fracturing or different developments of Java that are going on. It's all part of the OpenJDK community, which means that any build that comes from the OpenJDK should be able to be one could be used in by certain for a certain situation, and you can use another build for another situation, and they should be interoperable. Sometimes there are subtle differences, but at the end of the day, the Java specification and the set of tests that are used, called the Java Compatibility Kit, that's a really important item that consists of over 100,000 different individual tests. And if you pass that test, then you now have assurance that you're passing all the requirements of saying that you're compliant with the Java specification. And most vendors and distributors of an OpenJDK based solution do have TCK tests, and they do actually pass those tests before they provide the distribution. But there are builds of OpenJDK out there that are not TCK tested, and obviously for enterprise kind of serious use, we certainly would recommend only using builds that are TCK tested.
There's a lot of new languages in the world. They all have this kind of new hip kid on the block kind of feel to them. What is the relationship between Java and all these new languages that are out there? Because as far as I know, it still dominates in the enterprise. So when do I use Java and maybe not use it?
Well, what's interesting is that Java as a base language, continues to be very, very popular and arguably the foundation of most enterprise applications. But as you note, there always are new languages that are being developed, and we've been at this for a long time. It's kind of interesting to track the popularity of languages over time. These things go through cycles. I mean, a number of years ago, people predicted that maybe Ruby was going to take over the enterprise, the love for the development seat. And obviously that hasn't happened. And so some of these, you kind of have to be a little bit patient and kind of, get through the hype cycle, and then ultimately they die down. One of the reasons that Java has persisted so long is that it's proven to be incredibly robust, incredibly scalable. And, while no language is perfect, and Java certainly has, its own set of shortcomings, at the end of the day, it is trusted, it's reliable. And, there's so many open source projects, open source frameworks, commercial products that companies can buy to leverage to build out, very complex business critical applications. So the ecosystem of Java is so large, it's tough to, readily replace that amount of know-how and third-party open source and commercial solutions that can be leveraged. That being said, there are languages also that are being developed that technically, while not Java, actually run on top of the Java runtime. So, for example, Kotlin is an example of a language that's gaining more and more popularity. So it's Java-like in terms of how an application gets developed, but it's technically not Java. But at the end of the day, it still is run within a Java framework, which makes, again, all the robustness and the trust and the security that advantages of Java. You still can do that and leverage a language like Kotlin. Scala is another example of a language that actually is run on a Java runtime. So there are others, Clojure. So a number of languages are also out there that are, at the end of the day, leverage the benefits of the Java runtime, but have their own semantics or their own levels of differentiation. Certainly, there are other languages for certain segments of the market. For example, in AI or machine learning, we certainly see an awful lot of Python, and that continues to, I think, to be fairly popular. And one of the exciting things I think that you're seeing with microservices like deployment architectures and being able to rapidly deploy applications in container environments is that developers are now able to break monolithic applications into multiple smaller pieces and run each piece as a service, which means that each piece can be written and developed in a language that may be best suited for the purpose of that service. And so it may be that the majority of the application suite might be written in Java, but there may be pockets that are more appropriate to be written in another language, such as maybe it's Node.js, maybe it's Python, as I mentioned. And so I think the architectural advancements that have happened also have allowed for sort of a best in breed approach and apply the best language for the task at hand.
Do you think developers are going to learn multiple languages, or will they specialize in one and then another developer will just create the other piece and we'll mix them together when we get to the build process or something?
It's a good question. I think most professional developers usually have a go-to language that they're most comfortable with. Many programmers, of course, certainly know multiple languages, but, languages are a bit of a religious thing. And, at some point it may come back to, what the initial language someone learned when they first were beginning their career as a professional developer, that, that always may be sort of the go-to language. I think at the end of the day, people get used to developing in a certain way and learn that, the tricks and the nuances of developing a certain language. And, they may lean towards that, given a choice. But, at the end of the day, a lot of the same principles exist in multiple languages, and, well-structured code, maintainability, those types of things, and obviously kind of the macro trends now of continuous integration and, a DevOps mentality, those types of things are largely language agnostic. And, those are extremely important in terms of being able to develop robust, secure, highly maintainable type of applications. And it's a wonderful thing overall for the development community to be able to have a rich set of tools that they can rely on.
Is it your sense that the Java community has embraced DevOps, or where are we on that maturity curve? Because it seems like there's a lot of activity now to accelerate application development, whether it's digital business transformation driven or whatever. But as the Java community's been around for 2 decades, are they on board with this program, or?
I think no question about it. I mean, I think the DevOps mentality really is very language agnostic. It really is more about how the development and operational cycle works hand in hand. And, really the change most organizations have to go through are more internal structural changes, so that, instead of the silos where you have a development environment that, reports up into a certain hierarchy, and you have your operational element that reports over here, and there's this grand handoff that occurs. Those types of walls are being taken down, and you have the development and the developers. Oftentimes now are literally the same people. Sometimes if they're not the same people, at least they're much more integrated in terms of sitting in the same department, hopefully, maybe literally sitting next to each other in a non-COVID world, to be able to allow that really tight integration between the development cycle and the operational cycle. Because it's, the cycle is critically important, because, things happen in deployment as part of the operational element that developers really need to be fully aware of as they develop their code. They need to understand the impact of, if they change their line, how it might impact the overall deployment. And the old days that the developer would kind of throw it over the wall to some QA organization, who then would throw it over the wall to some ops team that would actually deploy it. certainly some organizations, haven't made the switch, but, by and large, a modern development organization is really going to have a DevOps mentality and a DevOps flow. And what that allows for is a much more reliable, faster development environment that allows for applications overall, features within those applications to be developed much more rapidly and much more reliably to the benefit of the end user. You're seeing more features, more capabilities, richer, et cetera. But back to your original question, these things are really more structural in terms of how applications are getting developed, very much language agnostic. Language, frankly, doesn't have a lot to do with it. It's much more about putting in the processes of how people work together and how systems are used to deploy applications.
Is Java any different in the cloud than it is on premise? Are there other things to consider when you want to use it with maybe Kubernetes? I mean, what's your thought process here?
Well, to first order, the answer is no, that applications that are written in Java running on-prem as opposed to in the cloud, by and large, it's a similar, set of requirements and knowledge base that needs to be done to deploy in either. Certainly, there are, emerging trends that, Java needs to continue to evolve to make sure that it's aligned with those trends. As an example, I mentioned before, kind of a migration towards more microservices types of architectures, container-based deployments that are potentially managed, as you mentioned, like Kubernetes. And as a result of that, instead of big monolithic applications running on these big massive servers, what we're seeing is smaller and smaller services. You could even truly think about them as microservices. I mentioned where instead of an entire service, maybe you're just talking about a specific function. So you're talking as a serverless environment that is even not even a full service. It's just a specific function that might be deployed, and that's the one entity, standalone thing that needs to be developed, maintained, made sure it's up and available for applications to use. The impact on the language in that environment means that the language itself and the runtime has to be very, very quick and nimble in terms of being able to be brought up and brought down and moved around, because the dynamic nature of how Kubernetes wants to work, how containers want to work in general, is you want to be able to very quickly spawn, move, shut down, have this truly elastic IT infrastructure. And languages like Java that actually are dynamically compiled when they're run, there are some issues that come up that are pushing the Java community to solve. And so you see enhancements being added to the Java language. You have vendors like Azul that actually have technology in our products that allow for a much more rapid start to the application than an off-the-shelf Java runtime. And so you see a lot of innovation happening in this space as well to address some of the shortcomings that kind of regular Java might have.
So what's your best advice then to any IT organization as they're looking at the Java landscape now? I think maybe something that they just kind of viewed as a check mark now requires a little more thought, but what should they be doing?
Well, I think first and foremost is really understanding your Java state is kind of the first step. And Java is so prevalent now that even that most basic question, where is Java being run within your organization? What's your Java inventory? What versions of Java are you using? Very basic questions, but frankly, in many organizations, they're very difficult to get. And so first of all, getting your hands around, the truest state of Java is the first step. And then the next thing is to recognize that, you need to develop a strategy for how you're going to assure that, all those versions of Java that you're running are up to date, that have the latest security patches applied, to make sure that your organization, is running in a compliant manner and running software that is the most secure that's available. And so developing a process and selecting a commercial vendor obviously is really important in this regard to make sure that you're able to sleep well at night knowing your deployment is secure, just like all the rest of your application stack, you need to be able to know exactly what versions you're running and where your security vulnerabilities may be, and have a plan in place to be able to address those. And so, again, in the context of Java, understanding that strategy, understanding, how you're going to evolve. And at the end of the day, kind of the wonderful thing that, is now available is that there are a number of vendors offering exactly the same type of support and capability that, previously maybe only were understood to be coming from Sun/Oracle. Well, now you have a number of vendors, obviously Azul being part of those, that offer, arguably superior support, better feature set in terms of unique value add for, Java-based applications, and, doing in a way that's actually cheaper than what an enterprise might pay Oracle. So, choice and competitive differentiation is always, at the end of the day, the win-win is for the end developer and the end enterprise.
Hey, great. Hey, Scott, thanks for being on the show.
Thanks, Mike. Very much appreciate the opportunity.
All right, folks, that was Scott Sellers, CEO of Azul Systems. Back to you guys in the studio.
Elsa, you're all over the place.
How am I supposed to do anything when she's over here just doing her own thing?
Okay, well, maybe if Dan played more than just one string, we'd all be more on the same page.
Are you out of your mind? Okay, I do the E string. That's my job.
Isn't there an easier way to do this? There
wish.
has to be.
I literally just suggested
Right?
something. Nobody ever listens to me, though, so...
Ridiculous every time.
When your team's not on the same page, things can get weird, fast. Don't make your DevOps team live like this.
El tutto tu tempo es finito, Dan.
See? It's like we're not speaking the same language. I'm out.
GitLab is the only single application for the entire DevOps lifecycle, making sure your teams are all on the same page.
Do you know how to play the E string?
I can learn.
Okay, thanks very much to Mike, Mitchell, Charlene, all of our guests today. That's going to call a wrap on episode 51 here for Thursday, June 11th of TechStrong TV. We hope you enjoyed the show. Remember, tomorrow we will have a best of repeat of a prior show of TechStrong TV, and we'll be back Monday with great new content. Stay tuned for then. Until then, have a great weekend as well. This is Alan Schimmel. Be safe, be well, be strong, TechStrong.